This week's guest is former U.S. Air Force intelligence and investigative journalist Don Winter, known from shows such as 48 Hours, Dateline, Nightline, the Discovery Channel, the BBC, and others. Beyond his work exposing criminal networks and catching serial killers in Latin America, Don is also a leading researcher of near-death experiences, building one of the most comprehensive NDE case archives anywhere. He brings military precision, investigative rigor, and a rare depth of insight to his study into what happens at the edge of life. In this week's episode, you'll learn about all of that, plus so much more.
I know I reached out to you out of the blue. You know, you never met me before this, but and I'm super glad that we got to connect. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
So, as far as topics then, and kind of jumping in the interview, the podcast always starts the same way. So if you're okay with it, let's do that.
Whatever
Don,
you want to do.
Thanks. So Don, where are you from?
I am from Middletown, New York, which is in the Hudson Valley region, about an hour's drive north of New York City.
Like an hour. Or I was going to say, is that an hour with traffic or an hour without traffic, or just?
It's anywhere between 2.5 hours or 45 minutes, depending on the time of day. And now, if you happen to be going south when everybody's, in the afternoon when everybody's leaving the city, you're fine. But if you're going to the city when everybody's going, because the city of New York now has about a population of like 8 million people, and then that population jumps to like 15 million every Monday through Friday, from 9 to 5 or during business hours. And There is a huge commute flow, and but if you're when you live up, there's a lot of people that are like firemen in the city. They live up here, but they do their job down there, or firemen or policemen or healthcare, or like I know guys that drive subway trains, so they live up here, but they drive to the city, or guys that do things like trash removal or plowing the streets, or all of the services that the city needs. The living in New York City is incredibly expensive. Anyway, that's the point. So it's an hour north, depending on, stuff.
Is it pretty rural area? I'm imagining a little more farmland, a little more grassland, a little.
So it's relatively, the city of Middletown has about 26,000 people in it. And it's an incorporated city. That's just a very small town, basically. It's, it's a city.
Sure.
Effectively it's a city, but it's not a big city. It's not huge.
Okay.
And it's surrounded by shopping malls and, Walmarts and strip malls and, in the surrounding areas, which is called the town of Wallkill, which is much more, not as residential and a lot more business oriented. So,
okay.
And there's also a connection of two major highways, which is 84, which goes east and west, and then 17, which runs up into New York State. So it's where those two cross. So it's kind of crossroads. And the history of the town is to do with railroads. It's where the rail lines back in the 1800s all came together at Middletown. So it got a lot, a lot of industry. There was a lot of industry and factories and stuff in town in the 1800s. And prior to that, it was all prior to.
Do you still see a lot of those roots? I feel like these industrial towns and cities from earlier times in our country, there's still sometimes remnants of that around through the culture and through the town. Is that still kind of there?
Yeah, the brick buildings have all been bought up and turned into apartments.
Sure,
so it used to be a factory that made, it was a knitting factory that made women's stockings, but now it's apartments.
I bet it's got a lot of.
There's a brewery that was an abandoned building when I was a kid, and it's now been turned into apartment.
That's wild.
It was an old beer brewery that went out of business because of prohibition.
Because of prohibition. Wow.
Prohibition killed them. Yeah, there was a brewery that made beer. They shipped beer all over the place, but then prohibition, they're done.
And it was abandoned since the 20s, and then it just barely wow.
When I was a kid growing up, they turned it into apartments after I joined the military in 1980. So
that's wild.
Relatively recently, but the thing was, for 60 years. It's a brick building. It's just not going to go anywhere.
But I mean, that kind of speaks to kind of the just what the place would feel like. I think. I mean, anyway, thanks for that analogy. That seems like that seems awesome. I love New York. It's a great city. Oh, all right. So you're in Middletown. And you said you stayed there until you effectively left and joined the military. Is that right?
Yeah. So At 18 years old, I graduated from high school in June,
Okay.
and then I left to report for basic training on the 18th of September. So I just basically took a couple of months off and then went straight into the military right after high school.
Were you a good student in high school, would you say?
No, I was absolutely terrible. I had really bad, and I had the attention span of a butterfly. And if I'm not interested in it, I don't care. I would do stupid things like read the entire book in the first week of class, and it was incredibly frustrating for me because I have a relatively high IQ. And I'm very inquisitive. And if I'm interested in things, and if it interests me, then I'm going to eat it alive. But if I'm in a room with 30 guys or 30 other people, other students, and the teacher is going at the pace of the slowest guy in the room,
Yeah.
I'm just like, nah, man, I just can't do that. So I just basically didn't go to high school. I spent my time playing Frisbee and hanging out and goofing off. And, interestingly enough, I graduated with a Regents Honors Diploma, which is something that New York State does, and I have no idea how. Basically didn't go. And this was an era when there was no internet, there was no reporting. They didn't, teachers, of course, would take their attendance and they would go, this guy never comes to class, and they would give me crap about it. But then I would, walk in and take their final exam and ace it. Most of the time because I was hanging out in the library and I got interested in economics. So I would read every economics book it was available and read the New York Times or, read the Wall Street Journal all day and stuff. So there was this one teacher that was really busting on me because I didn't go to his class. And I actually was correcting his final exam because he had mistakes on it.
That's funny.
So,
it's amazing what you can.
I could learn really, really well, but I was a terrible student for the machine. I just did not do well on the treadmill at all. So.
I mean, this tracks a lot with just my understanding of you. It's amazing what you can learn, isn't it? By just reading tangential information and understanding what's going on in the world. Like you talked about reading the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and all these economic periodicals. Like you just learn a lot about just about everything. If you just start reading those things, get some math, get some finance, get some business, get some general, you become a better writer, a better English student, just everything. If you just spend some time reading quality publications. I think there's so much value in that.
My brain feeds off of dopamine. So if I get interested in something and I'm interested in it, then I'm going to eat it alive. I'm just going to dive into it and consume everything and learn everything I can about it until I'm interested by something else. And I'll wander over there, and that'll be fine. It's just kind of the way I approach it.
So how did kind of that following the dopamine hits, which I can heavily relate to. How did that lead to you joining the military? I mean, you're in the library. I can see you there, skipping school, which is super interesting, by the way. That you're, skipping school and going to the library. I think that is, I don't know. This is starting to paint a picture of you that I like. That's really interesting. So you're skipping school, you're going to the library, you're consuming this information that you find interesting, which makes perfect sense. And then how did you come across the military?
So my best friend at the time, Joe Phillip, just came up one day and said, hey, guess what? I joined the military. I'm going to join the Air Force. I'm going to go put bombs on F-4s or fix F-4s jets in California at George Air Force Base, which doesn't exist anymore. I went, you did what now? He's like, yeah. I was like, why the hell did you do that, Joe? He goes, well, think about it. You live in a barracks, you got a job. They're going to teach you how to fix airplanes. It's like, for Christ's sakes, they even give you uniforms, they even dress you. It's like, I'm like, okay. Cause I really wasn't set up to go to college. I knew that I needed some kind of structure, and just because I knew that from my own experience in high school, I knew that if who knows what would have happened to me if I didn't join the military. So I just said, okay, let me go talk to the guy. So I went down and talked to him, and long story short, joined the military and did 20 years.
Were you said you knew that you needed structure. Was that something that someone had told you or taught you, or was that something you just, you were self-aware enough to be like, I need some structure.
I just knew that left to my own devices, it was not going to go well for me. I just knew that I needed some kind of structure. And if you don't show up for work in the military, that's called AWOL,
Yeah, kind of a big deal.
You can be prosecuted under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for not showing up to work. So that structure, It's not like, well, we'll fire you. It's like, no, you're going to go. Yeah. Bad things will happen. So
yeah,
I just, I needed that structure. That's all. Yeah.
That's super interesting. And I respect a lot that you had the self-awareness at 17 or 18 years old to be like, look, I need some of this in my life. That's it. I think it speaks a lot about you. Okay. So you end up joining the military and you joined the Army?
Air Force.
Air Force. Okay. Join the Air Force. That's right. Yes. Air Force. And did you end up going to, I mean, I never served, so I don't know anything about this really, but you said your buddy was at George Air Force Base in California, but did you end up go? I mean, I'm guessing you guys didn't end up, serving in the same place. Was your desire to do the same thing, or like how did that whole thing work out?
I didn't know. The only thing I knew about the military was watching the Vietnam War on TV when I was a kid, war movies, reading, comic books about, World War II, things like that. I didn't know anything about the reality of serving in the military. But the way it works is when you walk into a recruiting office and you say, hey, I'm kind of interested, they go, okay, great. So we're going to give you a series of tests because they need to rack and sort everybody and figure out what your capabilities are. So they give you the initial test, which kind of is like, all right. But then once you do well on that, it's like, well, we're going to give you a test about this and about that. And this one's about electronics, and this one's about computers, and this one's about language, and this one's about, all of these other things, because they're going, okay, we got a guy who's relatively intelligent here. So let's see. And then I blew all those tests out of the water. It's like, can you do math? Can you do racial, spatial reasoning for mechanics and stuff like that? And I didn't know. I was like, I just did as good as I could on all the tests. So then they bring you back into the recruiting center, and now it's time to decide what career path you're going to go on and what job you're going to do. And there were 6 different guys there, plus the actual recruiter that I was working with out of my hometown. And each one of these guys had a pitch. They were like, well, we need guys to, it's called security policemen. We need guys to defend the airplanes and to defend the bases. I'm like, okay. And this is like, 1980. So the computer field was brand new. There were no PCs. There were none of that, but computers was a thing. And they're like, well, we think you'd be really good, working with computers. I'm like, okay. And there were several other ones, electronics and radars and fixing planes and all of that stuff. But then the last one was this guy. It's like, well, you've done really well on this language aptitude battery, and we would like you to be a linguist. I'm like, well, what's that mean? Well, we're going to teach you a foreign language, and you're basically going to go spy on people. I'm like, and that one came along with a $2,000 bonus and 2 strikes. So if I completed the training, if I made it through the school and got assigned to my first duty assignment, I'd be promoted twice and I'd have a check for $2,000. And $2,000 at that time was a lot of money.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to put the power of inflation behind this. Wait, ballpark, what year is this? We're talking 70s right now?
1980.
1980. Yeah. So $2,000 from 1980 to today.
And especially for
I'm going to do that.
Fresh out of high school, whatever the money is.
Look, but you tell me right now, $2,000, that feels like I'm coming out of high school. Yeah. That feels like so much money. And $2,000.
Oh, I bought it. I was in Korea. I bought a killer stereo system because they had all the stuff from Japan. Oh, dude, I was rocking me some Zeppelin, brother. I tell you what, it was a very, very good speakers this big, and a, Yamaha M80 amplifiers, one for each channel. Believe me, I was tearing it up, and I bought a camera, bought a Nikon.
Nice. Okay. So this is a foreshadowing here, maybe, of your introduction.
It was an F3 camera, by the way. I was really into photography.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I turned to all those other guys. I was like, do any of you other knuckleheads have, $2,000 and 2 stripes on my arm? They went, no. I was like, I'm going with that guy. So that was
Seems logical. I like it. Okay. So did you look at any of the other branches, or was this is all happening after you kind of got signed with
I had friends of mine that had joined the Marine Corps. My father was in the Navy Reserves during the Korean War, and my best friend had joined the Air Force. So I just started with the Air Force, That
makes sense. Yeah.
That's all. I didn't really know the difference. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just went downhill,
I think I like that idea of just like you said, going downhill, just like, okay, well, this is kind of where This is where the water, like let's follow the path where the water would go, and
I had nothing better
we'll get there
do.
eventually.
It was gonna be, get a job washing dishes down at the local restaurant, and do that, and then drink beer at night. That was my plan. It wasn't much of a plan. So
hey, I mean, I'm glad you took this approach. All right, so you end up joining the military, and how was that? Was it a surprise? I mean, what was the whole thing? Was it what you expected, or was it like, oh, what did I get myself? Do you ever have one of those what did I get myself into moments?
no, basic training was relatively easy because it's basically just shut up and do what you're told. I was young and didn't have any aches and pains like I have now. I was in good shape because I was, physically active and, like doing, physical things. So the physicality of it, oh, we're going to run. Yeah, so what?
Right,
Somebody's yelling at you. All right, well, if you just do what they tell you to do, they don't yell at you. They yell at the other guy. All right, fine. So that was easy. That was stupid. And then it ended up with the language school for a year, and I had no idea what to expect there. The way they do it is they give everybody this language ability test, and then the better you do on the language test, the different kind of language they put you into. So the guys that did the absolute best on that went into Arabic. So that was, and again, now we're talking, this was Jimmy Carter was president, and Iran had just gone down where they took the embassy 47 years ago. So they were scrambling to train Arabic linguists. And so those were the guys who did the absolute best on those tests went into Arabic. The next tier was Korean and Chinese. So I went into the Korean tier, or the Korean group, and they were also looking for a bunch of people for Korean. Particularly because of North Korea. North Korea has been a problem since the 50s, so that's always been a mess. So it was off to the Presidio of Monterey in California. Beautiful place. I was there for the entire year of 1901 studying. My job was to study Korean all day, Monday through Friday, from 7:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon, verbs and adjectives and vocabulary and Chinese characters.
How did that work with you, kind of your propensity to consume knowledge? I mean, consume information? Did you find that a struggle, or was it?
It was surprising to me that I had the ability to learn language and to follow along and to do okay. And my attitude was day by day, and I remember calling my parents up and going, I'd get through, they had these block tests, they would give you so many lessons. It was 100 lessons. And I think it was every 20 or 25 lessons, they would have like a block. So a big exam on that material that had been presented to you. And then, if you get past the block test, well, now you're going on to the next block. So it was like a survival kind of thing. And I remember calling my parents up and going, hey, I'm still here. They haven't washed me out yet. And a lot of people did get washed out. The washout rate was pretty high. But anyway, made it through that. And it was just simply do the work. You got to learn the language. That's the job. The job was to learn the language. So I did.
That's cool. Okay, so then you're in California, but you didn't stay there forever, right? You ultimately ended up going into your job.
Yeah, that course is kind of what you would consider to be the civilian side. Getting a hotel room and hi, how are you? And doing the day-to-day conversation, the nicety conversation of just talking about basic things in the language. The next 6 months was at an Air Force base in Texas. And that was like the military side of it. So now you're still doing the Korean language, but now you're doing the classified listening in on communication side of the job. So it's called signals intelligence. You're listening to those signals and you're collecting them and recording them and transcribing them. So that's the first thing. That's now you've got a security clearance. So I had a it's called a level 6 TS-SCI security clearance in 1980, the end of 1981, when I reported to that place in the beginning of 1982. So
can you tell me what
yeah, it's special compartmented information, top secret / special compartmented information. And compartmented just means that you have to have a demonstrated need to know. So it's the top secret confidential tiers basically describe the damage that would be done to the United States of America if that information is disclosed. And then so you start off with the classification level, but then you have the caveats that come after that. So there's caveats for things like information that is based on human intelligence, which is different from signals intelligence, or from overhead, things like satellites that can take pictures or satellites that can listen to signals. So there's all kinds of these different caveats of the way that the information is channeled and kept away from the people that don't really have a need to know it.
And the level 6, you said it was a TS-SCI clearance level 6. Is the level 6 like stripes on a black belt, essentially? Like the higher the higher this. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a level 6 clearance at that time was pretty high. That still is pretty high. That's kind of like the gold standard. That's where most people kind of top out. I found out later when I got into special operations that there's a few levels beyond that, and there's also tighter things that are held, because there's two reasons to classify information. There's, if you're collecting information, well, then you want to protect the source of that information, because if the other guys know that you're listening in on their communications or whatever, then they'll stop using it. So that's why that's
protected. That makes sense. Sure.
Now, the other side of it is your operational side. We're going to go at night under the radar. We're going to come in from the north. We're going to, fast rope out of the helicopters. No, that's operational. So you're trying to protect that because you don't want your guys to get shot before they get there. So
sure.
That's, the basic, and of course there's all kinds of other stuff, industrial, we're building a new whatever, a new airplane that can do things that no other airplane can do. So of course you want to protect that. There's all kinds of reasons to protect information and keep things secret. You want your best things to be a surprise until you pull it out and go, guess what? I got one of these. Bam. It's like, oh, geez, we didn't know that was coming. That's the reason for that.
All right. So, how are these? Can you talk about? Just curious. Like, so you described the different types of intelligence that you're working on, but or that not you're working on, but that are out there. But your area was signal intelligence, and like, are you like SIGINT? Okay. Were these like are these recorded conversations, or how? Like, what types of conversations are you listening into?
You ever listen to a scanner? Just a police scanner?
Yeah, I had a buddy when I was growing up, and they had a police scanner. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine hooking up you've got a police scanner. That the police and the fire department in your local town are talking about what's going on. Just imagine hooking up a recording to that. It's being recorded. You're listening in. You're making notes about what's going on. You're doing a little report. Hey, there's an accident over on highway so-and-so. And,
okay.
truck and that truck's going to it, So the military communications are really not that much different, especially at the low level tactical level. And again, this was back in these early 80s.
Okay, yeah.
And a lot of the communications were relatively low power. So you're talking VHF, or very high frequency, and you're also not talking a lot of watts behind the signal. So it's designed to be tactical units that are just a few miles from one another. So you're not really thinking about, you're doing a training operation and you're 50 miles beyond the DMZ, and you're not really concerned about anybody listening in on your communications at that point.
And so your job, it sounds like what you're saying is that you would take this information, you're listening to it and either recorded or in real time, and then you're kind of making notes of the relevant information and trying to paint a picture. Is that kind of you? Because you talked about writing down, this is happening over here, and then you're using this information to just I don't know what you're using it for, but just your job is to paint a picture of take a bunch of different data points, put them together in a cohesive place so that someone can understand it. Okay.
What's going on?
That's cool.
It comes down to collection, processing, and reporting. So the collection is at the moment of collection. So when you're getting it in real time, so then you're doing what we would call a hand scan. So you're like, okay, so this is what's, you're as it's being said and as it's being recorded, you're doing a hand scan of the conversation. And then if there's anything really interesting or dangerous to our forces, they're going to attack something or blow something up, that was the whole point, something that's tactical. Well, then you would put out a report about that immediately, as it's happening. So, depending on exactly what the severity was of the situation, but then all of that's recorded. So then the other part of your job is when you're not actually, doing the actual recording, you're listening to those tapes that you or either you or somebody else recorded, and then you're doing the transcription process. So that was all transcribing, and then all of that information is shipped back, and then that's where it's all analyzed, and then they write longer term reports based on many sources of information. So that's the process.
And I think you said it, but I didn't quite catch it. But why is it called a hand scan? Is it just because this is what's happening, like task at hand, like a quick thing, or is it like
you're doing it with your hand?
Oh, duh. Okay.
And you're doing it, we'd call it hand jamming or scanning or whatever.
Got it. Yeah.
It's like, could you imagine somebody listening to our conversation and we're going in real time, which is pretty quick. Yeah. But then somebody else is just listening to it and they've got a scratchy yellow pad of paper, and they're trying to write down everything that we're saying as we're saying it.
Good point. Yeah.
So it's like you got to be able to follow the conversation and get enough of the gist of it, not necessarily word for word, but if it's a military unit and they're like, okay, that's it, we're going to go across the border right now. It's like, what?
Oh yeah.
There you go. Now we got a problem.
Did you have a specific, do you kind of just develop your own system for this, for taking your notes or tracking it? Or did you use like the court reporter?
You develop your own little shorthand, you know, symbology and stuff. And you can just, you develop your own, they kind of teach you kind of the best way to do it, but then you also pick up your own little things that work better for you.
That makes sense. I mean, but effectively, just like anything else, right? I mean, I'm thinking like if you're in college, you're taking notes and you're organizing them and putting that. Okay. All right. So how long did you do this job for?
So Korean until 1986. So I was in.
Oh, that's a good time. Good long time.
Yeah, 6 years. That was my first enlistment was 6 years. So I ended up going, I went to Korea. So the Korea at the time was called a 1-year remote tour. So remote means you don't, if you have a family, if you're married or whatever, your family doesn't go with you. So it was considered like a hardship tour. So we're going to send you to Korea for a year. You're going to be separated from your family. And the training process was the language school for a year, 6 months in the States. But then when you get to Korea, the on-the-job training took about 9 months because you have category 1, category 2, category 3 for both transcription and collection. So by the time you're there for 9 months of a 1-year tour, you're finally, after all of this training, you're finally blessed to be a fully qualified operator. So I'm like, So I spent a year in language training, 6 months in Texas, 9 months here doing on-the-job training, and I'm finally qualified, and I got 3 months left on my tour. Yeah. I extended. I did another tour. So I did back-to-back voluntarily. I did 2 years in a row in Korea just because I wanted to actually gain some real, no kidding experience, get some wear on the tires a little bit as an actual full-blown qualified operating linguist. So I did that voluntarily. So I spent 2 years, 82 to 84 in Korea. And then after that, I was assigned back to Fort Meade, Maryland at the National Security Agency as an analyst. So now I'm analyzing the stuff that's pouring into the building from these collection sites around the world.
I bet that was an interesting perspective to be on the other side of that, right? I mean, you're receiving you probably get a new level of appreciation for, quality reports and insights that are coming in.
Oh, yeah.
And
well, it's quantity and quality because there's different sources, so you might have the same thing going on, but it's being covered by different, collection facilities, so you get a better idea of what the hell's going on. But the most important thing there was that's where I learned to be an analyst. That's where the idea of, they had this thing. So most of the people that work at NSA are not military. Most of them are civilians. And they have a GS schedule. So GS 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, they get promoted as they go through their career. And they have this thing called a professionalization program. So the professionalization program is just the way to say a school, so that if you're doing this kind of a job, then you can take these kinds of classes. And then as you pass those classes, then now you get to these different levels, and that kind of opens up promotion tracks for the civilians.
Nice.
Okay. But that was available to us military guys. So they said, well, you can go to the schoolhouse and you can take these classes. I was like, what? Really? I can go? Okay, great. So I signed up for everything I can get my hands on, it was really interesting stuff. And I would okay, so if it's Monday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, I got to be, instead of going to my regular job, I go to the schoolhouse and I'm there for 3 hours. And then I would rack up these credits. The credits were not college credits or anything, but I was more interested just in the subject matter itself. So I took as many of those as I could get my hands on. And I just like doing different things. There's a thing called the National Security Operations Center, or NSOC. So this is a 24/7 facility. The lights are always on. At the time anyway, it was a big, you can imagine from the movies, a huge room with a lot of computer screens, no windows and no lights, because everybody's in there is working 24/7. It's a 24/7 operation. So they don't want you to know if the sun's up. It's kind of like in a casino, it's better if you don't know that it's 2 o'clock in the morning, because these guys are, a lot of them. And they had I want to say 3 guys that were assigned there for 3 different shifts. But if any of them had a reason to do where they couldn't show up for their shift or whatever, I volunteered to be basically a backup for those guys. So if somebody had a appointment that they had to go to, or somebody was sick or whatever, then I would fill in for them. They would just notify me and say, hey man, go down to the NSOC. It's like, okay. So I would go cover the desk there. It was just a really, because it's kind of like the hub. You got the entire world there. There's different desks that cover every part of the planet, and it's just a very interesting place to work.
What is that information? So is the NSOC, is that in Maryland on Fort Meade?
Yep.
Okay. So where does the information go from there?
Well, it's all part of the national intelligence structure. That the intelligence is really simple. You find out what people need to know. You find it out, you write a report, and you send it to a decision maker. And then the decision maker decides what they want to blow up and when. That's just what it comes down to. It's really simple.
That, yeah, well, when you explain it like that, it's hard to poke holes in that argument. Fair enough.
When I became a journalist, I was an investigative journalist. It was exactly the same thing. Let me go get the information. I kind of know what people are interested in. So what's going on, what's in the news, what's happening. All right. You gather the information, you do your analysis on it. You write the report, you put out the news article, and then people read it. The only difference is you're putting it out to the public. You're not putting it out to a military chain of command decision maker. That's all. But the process is exactly the same if you're doing it right. So
earlier you said this is the time where you learned how to be an analyst. Is that part of learning how to be an analyst? Which let me rephrase that: is understanding what's interesting based on your audience. Was that part of it? Understanding what kind of information either your decision maker that you said or the public would find interesting, or is that?
It's not what they would find interesting. So
or useful, I should say, yeah, or whatever.
It kind of comes down to the scenario, like what's going on. And I remember a couple of things that they would give us these as a student in some of these classes. They would give us a scenario, and it was basically they would give us the intelligence reports as they came in, where they didn't know what was going on. But here's what the reports say. And it's like, okay, here's the first report. Okay. And then as a class, we're like, okay, we're looking at that, and maybe it's this, maybe it's that. You're speculating. Okay. Well, I wish we had more information. Perfect. Here's the next report. Oh, okay. So there's a little more information. Well, now that's kind of, and then as it clarifies, and then at the end of the process, it's like, okay, so now that we've done all that, here's what was really going on. It's like, oh, all right. Yeah. All right.
That's cool.
There was like an operation. It turns out the bottom line, the punchline of this was there was a Navy operation that was going on, and nobody knew what the hell was going on. It turns out that it was a Japanese ship that was sunk during World War II that was full of like gold or silver or something. And another
like an actual treasure hunt.
Yeah, no, it was a.
That's wild.
Because their submarines. I mean, the submarines. I think it was the Chinese that were recovering it at the time. But we didn't know what the hell they were doing. They're like, "What's this?" It's some kind of an operation. But then again, that's the process that they went through. It's like here's the the information as it came dribbling out.
That's
and then the
wild.
bottom line was, well, back during World War II, a U.S. submarine torpedoed this ship that was supposed to be medical supplies or something, but it turns out it was full of gold. So now the Chinese are recovering it. That was the actual scenario, but it was pretty cool. That kind of thing.
That's really cool.
The thing is, and the point of it as an intelligence analyst or reporter, it's like you got to know what you know. You got to know what you don't know. You got to know, factor in things like there was one situation that I don't want to go into the details of it, but it really came down as well. What it was kind of a pressure situation between countries, and we didn't know what the other guys were going to do. And the answer from an intelligence point of view was we were able to determine that the guy in the other country, the decision maker in the other country, hadn't made up his mind yet. Wow. That's why we didn't know we didn't know what they were going to do, because he didn't know what they were going to do.
And that's hard, man. That's a tricky situation to be. Sure. But gosh, that's a tricky situation to be in. If you're in an intense situation and you're like, what is he going to do? And he doesn't know what he's going to do.
Because he's facing the same dilemma. The U.S. was putting pressure on, and it's like, how's he going to respond?
He's like, I don't know.
So you could sit around and you can speculate all day long, but he's doing the same speculation. What if I do this? What if I do that? He hadn't made up his mind.
Wow.
So,
That's
and
intense.
That kind of stuff happens all the time.
I'm sure. So I have a question on this treasure hunting thing that, I'm going to call it treasure hunting because that's effectively these guys were
the recovery operation.
Let's call it the recovery operation. Does stuff like that ever make
this old stuff too? I'm talking.
Yeah. But does that ever? Did that ever make does that ever make it to, Joe Q public, stuff like that? Or is this just stuff that
I'm assuming it did. Yeah. Again, because we're talking, it was probably happened in the 60s. It was an old scenario that they were using just to teach us the idea, the concept. Oh,
I see what you're saying. So this isn't something that this scenario that you're talking about isn't something that happened real time. This is a learning situation.
It's a training situation from this schoolhouse.
Got it. Okay.
How to do analysis. But that was part of just an example of the things that they kind of did. It's like,
I see what you're saying.
Sometimes the information comes trickling in and you have to figure it out as you go along. Yeah.
That makes, copy.
In other words, don't make assumptions. Understand the use of the word probable, possible, I got no friggin' idea.
Yes.
So that's, and well, anyway, keep going.
No. I was just, please continue with your story. I was just saying this makes sense. Anyway, yeah, please. Mm-hmm. So this is a training scenario that they're using as an example to talk you through it or walk you through it, give you a real time, or not real time, but just a more tangible example of this is how you can apply it. You learn through the process. Got it. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's super interesting, man. I don't know. I could see why you would like the whole thing and working through it. Obviously, not obviously. I shouldn't even say that. Okay, so you spent some time at the fort working there.
Well, so at that point in my career, I came up on the 6-year point. My first enlistment was 6 years long.
Okay.
So I had to make a choice then. Do I get out of the military or do I reenlist? And that's the one place, this was back in 1986. I don't know what they're doing now, but at that time that the Air Force would say, okay, here's the opportunity. If you would like to change what you're doing from a career and to go in a different direction, in other words, if you reenlist and if you want to do something that the Air Force wants and needs, then we can maybe make that happen. We'll consider that possibility. So I said, okay, at this point in time, I had already done the training for Korea and I had already been in Korea for 2 years and I'd already been to Fort Meade. But the guys that I was working with at Fort Meade, most of them, a lot of the older guys particularly, they have been going Fort Meade, Osan, Korea, Fort Meade, Osan, Korea for a 20-year career.
Wow.
They've been doing the exact same thing, bouncing back and forth across the pond. And I was like, dude, I don't want to do a 20-year career doing the same damn job. I was like, I've already done it. I've seen it. I know what it's going to, be like. And I just don't want to do that for 20 years. So I found out that there was a thing called the Peacetime Aerial Reconnaissance Program, which is basically doing the same job, but flying on airplanes. And they got paid flight pay. Hey. And every mission that we flew was considered to be a combat mission. So you would earn air medals, which helped towards promotion. And it was more interesting. So now in order to put your brain in the right frame here, if you're old enough, you have to think Oliver North, Iran, Contra, Central America, Ronald Reagan is president. They're afraid of the domino effect. And this is before the wall came down. So it's, right in the middle of the Cold War. And there was a big concern about Nicaragua. And Cuba, Russia, Soviet Union was pushing weapons into Cuba. Cuba was supplying all of the guerrillas all throughout Central America. So there was like this panic going on in the military. There were a lot of people in the military that spoke Spanish, but none of them, or practically none, there was a small cadre, but not a lot of them were professionally trained signals intelligence linguists that had any experience or any knowledge of what they were doing. So there was a big push on, like, we need Spanish linguists now. I went, all right. I said, here's the deal. I will reenlist because I didn't want to go through any accelerated, half done, half baked language training, because I had already been through Monterey and through the school in Texas. So I said, all right, if I can go back to Monterey for Spanish, if I can go back to Texas for the technical side of it, if I can go through survival school in Spokane, Washington, and then if I can go to Panama and fly on C-130s and do the job on C-130s, then I'll sign up. And they went, perfect. That's exactly what we need. So there you go. And then also at that point, when I decided to reenlist the first time, I said, if I re-enlist once, I'm going to do 20 years. I'm going to stay in for the whole 20 till I can retire. So I made those two decisions at the same time. It's like, I'm going to re-enlist now, but I'm also going to stay in and do the 20. So I made that my own brain commitment to that at the time. So that's what I did. I went back through Spanish in Texas, survival school in Spokane, Washington, and then shipped off to Panama in 1987.
And why did you want to go to survival school, or was that a requirement? It sounds cool for what it's worth. It was.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you're flying on C-130s, and there's two different kinds of training. So there's if you get shot down, and it's basically a combat military style thing. So what if you become a POW? What if you get picked up by partisans, that are resistance people that are behind the lines or something? Or what if you're doing escape and evasion? And, it's one thing if you just get lost in the woods. It's another thing if you get lost in the woods behind the battle lines, and this was based on guys getting shot down in Vietnam all the time, that they would, their B-52 gets blown out from under them by an SA-2 missile. They're hanging in a parachute. They land in the jungle in Vietnam somewhere. And now they're in North Vietnam, and they don't know the neighborhood. They don't know the plants. They're looking for a Big Mac somewhere, but they can't find one. So you have to learn how to do things like food diversion and, escape and evade and not get caught and, figure out what to eat and what not to eat and how to move and how to communicate and all these things. So that's what the school taught.
Because Big Macs sometimes aren't available in the jungle.
Well, that's the thing. If you're in the jungle, you are literally surrounded by protein, but it wasn't in the form of a Big Mac. So one of the biggest things they teach you is food aversion. Basically the word of the day at survival school was muck it on down. Don't worry about it. Just, you're putting the calories in your body because you need them. That's all. And at that point, when you're done with that school, you will eat anything.
Do you still have a little bit of that in you? Still a little bit of that? You're just like, I'll eat it, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. If it's a survival situation, a dog's got to be nervous. I mean, protein is protein, bro.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is like people will do crazy stuff, especially when not crazy stuff. Your body is designed to survive. And so like, especially if you know what to do, like you're going to do whatever it takes to survive. But I mean, that's a big Spokane, Washington. I mean, I guess I don't know, that's on the other side of the state, right? I mean, it's not like the rainy, South America style. It's just, yeah. So, I mean, that's interesting. I just think is that where survival school just is for the military, or is that just,
that's all. It's just it's a base, and that's where
it wasn't like specific. Okay. So it wasn't specific to South America. Just like
there are specialized school for Arctic and for jungle and for, water, like in the ocean, for if you got a ditch in the ocean and stuff like that. There are specialized survival schools as well, but for every air crew goes through that school.
Makes sense.
If you fly in a plane, you've been to Spokane in the military.
That's cool.
They have like the POW camp there. So you learn how to act when you're a POW when you get captured. For the recon guys, there's other specialized training that the rest of the air crews don't go through, because there's a much higher possibility that if you're doing intelligence collection, that, if you think about like the Pueblo, there's, throughout history, there have been lots of situations where people that are in intelligence collection roles, because a lot of times you have to get close to the bad guy countries. And if they say, oh, they crossed over the line, so they put a snatches gravis on you. Now it's peacetime, so you're not at war, and they're going to try to get you to admit to being whatever it is that they want you to admit to create opportunities for propaganda, and you remember, this is right in the middle of the height of the Cold War.
Good point.
So there was some additional training that people that were in my role went through. So
makes sense.
So the regular get shot down in wartime kind of a scenario.
Sure. Okay. So thanks for going down that little rabbit hole with me too, by the way. I just think that's interesting. So you go through all the training, you did what your plan was, and then you end up getting stationed in Panama. Okay. Yep. And then how long did you stay?
Well, I was in Panama off and on from 1987 until I retired in the year 2000. So the first tour was 3 years long. So 1987 until 1990. During that time, there was Operation Just Cause, which was the invasion of Panama to remove Manuel Noriega. I'd like to say I didn't have to invade anybody. I was already there. So I was actually standing on the tarmac. There's some famous video footage when they finally captured Noriega it's called the Papa Nuncio. in Panama City. So when he was finally apprehended, they put him on a Black Hawk helicopter, flew him to Howard Air Force Base, and then they took him off the helicopter, walked him across the tarmac, and put him on the airplane. And I was right there when they did that. So as they marched him across, I think it was DEA that had him in handcuffs and put him on the airplane, flew him back. So
wow.
I was there for that, my little window into history. So they used to call him cara de piña, which is pineapple face, because he had acne when he was a teenager.
Oh,
so
yeah.
His skin was all screwed up, but they'd call him cara de piña. So
I'm guessing this
had to be there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating time in history. The recent thing with in Venezuela, does that hit pretty close to home? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah. So fast forward. Let me go through just
okay. Yeah, we'll come back to the
1987 to 1990 in Panama. After 1990, I was assigned back to Fort Meade, but I was not assigned to the NSA. I was assigned to there was it was a worldwide deployable unit. So the idea was you've got a collection system and you've got linguists from all the different, we call them shreds. So shred just means a different language, like Arabic and Korean and Spanish and, all the different kinds of language linguists that were there. So all of these different people were assigned to this unit. And then we didn't have anything to do sitting on the ground at Fort Meade. So Bob Kohari, who was our operations superintendent, he would get on the phone and he would find things for us to do. And our unit motto was anytime, anywhere, for per diem. So there were times that I would go, I spent 300 days deployed out of 365. Literally would come home. I'd come home on a Friday afternoon with a duffel bag full of dirty laundry. I'd have time to wash the clothes, take a shower, maybe get something to eat, and then show up on Saturday morning to deploy somewhere else for some other activity or some exercise or whatever we were doing. It was like a lot of times I didn't even know, you know where you're going and what you're doing, but just one exercise after another.
Wow.
And we did a lot of really cool things there, but it was a lot of time on the road and a lot of deployments. For example, we did an operation with a Navy aircraft carrier, which was an aircraft carrier battle group. Actually, it was the USS America, and they were leaving out of Norfolk and they were going to steam past Bermuda and they were going to go to the North Atlantic. So what they do is they call it a workup. So when they got their crew and they're pulling out of, they're getting everybody up, they want to get everybody up to speed on the entire battle group and everybody doing their jobs. But one thing they wanted to practice was the interoperability of coordinating with, and we were considered a national level intelligence collection unit. So they wanted to have the Navy exercising to work with those kinds of assets. So they wanted someone to be the liaison on board the aircraft carrier. So I said, sure, I'll go. They're like, okay. Everybody else wanted to go be in Bermuda and fly the missions out of Bermuda and sit on the beach and drink beer when they weren't flying. And here I am with 5,000 knuckleheads on an aircraft carrier. But as a result of that, it was a really cool experience because I got, in my military experience, the opportunity to do what's called a trap. So you land on the carrier in what's called a COD, or the Carrier Onboard Delivery Aircraft. So I was picked up by the COD at Norfolk, flew out to the aircraft carrier, did a trap, and then I was on the carrier for, I want to say, about 10 days. And then when that was done, and again, I was the guy the Air Force guy that is in the intel spaces with the Navy ship. And then when they're doing that coordination for the exercise traffic, I was helping them with their communications and the crypto and, when they say that means this, it's like, oh, okay, to help those guys so that they could better integrate. Now, the most interesting part of that entire trip, when I first got on the ship, there was this Navy commander who was giving me the tour. It's like, okay, this is where you're going to sleep and this is where you're going to work and this is where you're going to eat and all that stuff. And we're going down the passageway there. And, I hear him as this guy's going walking by us. He says, "Morning, CAG." So the CAG, the CAG, is the commander of the air group. And I just was an officer, and I just nodded at him. He went by, and I heard him say, "You stop." I was like, "Yeah, yes, sir." And he goes, "That's not one of my flight suits. Who the hell are you?" So everybody that flies an airplane on a carrier works for the CAG, and he knows every flight suit and all of the insignia, and he knows who's who. But he knew that there was a strange flight suit on his aircraft carrier, and he wanted to know who the hell I was. He's like, I told him, He goes,
yeah,
right.
which I mean, I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he goes, okay, here's what we're going to do. He reaches over and he starts pulling off all my Velcro, all my name tags, my rank, my insignia, my units, all this stuff. And he starts stuffing them in my pocket. And he goes, don't wear any insignia. Don't wear rank. Don't wear unit. Don't wear nothing. Just wear a plain flight suit. And he says, I want you to get the full experience of being on an aircraft carrier, because this is probably going to be the only time in your life that you're going to have a chance to do this. He says, I want you to go anywhere you want. He says, you've already got access to the secure spaces from the security clearance point of view. So as far as anything else, he says, you can go anywhere you want in this aircraft carrier. And if anybody questions you, you just tell them to talk to me. I went, thanks, because I'd just been given the golden ticket. I mean, this was like Willy Wonka, you know. I'm like, perfect. And so I thought about it. I'm like, I'm taking advantage of this shit. So I would eat breakfast with the swabbies, you know, all the younger enlisted guys. I would eat lunch with like the chiefs, and I would eat dinner with the admiral. I mean, I would literally just show up at the admiral's mess and they would just sit me down. And I went everywhere on that ship that I could think of going. There was any space I wanted to go in. And I would say, what are you guys doing? They're like, well, sir, you know, they had no idea who I was. And they'd tell me, well, our job here is to monitor these things and make sure that nothing blows up. Okay, great. The best one was, they're doing, as part of this exercise that we're doing, they were doing nighttime combat aircraft takeoff and recovery at night in the rain, and aircraft on aircraft carriers take off on full afterburner. So you get this long blue flame that's 30 feet coming out of the back of the plane. And it was just a light show, you know? And I'm thinking, man, this is really cool. I was like, where's the best place to watch this? You know, I'm thinking, hey, probably up on the bridge. They probably got a pretty good view. So I go up to the bridge, right? And I got a cup of coffee in my hand. And there's this really nice leather chair that overlooks the flight line, right on the bridge. And all the guys in the bridge are like, they're all, you know, they look at me and they all went back to their jobs, because again, they have no idea what I'm doing. So I went over and sat down on the chair. Turns out that's the captain's chair. Okay. So the admiral's chair, actually, in that case, in battle group. And nobody, and I mean nobody, sits in that chair. But everybody looked at me. So I just sat down, put my feet up, drinking my coffee.
Oh my gosh.
And everybody, and I mean 100%, everybody on that bridge looked at me, and they all thought the same thing. I got no idea who that dude is, but if he's got the guts to sit in that chair, more power to him. I'm not going to question him. So I got to watch a few takeoff and landings on the runway there, and drank my coffee and went about my business.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you at some point realize, shoot, this is what chair this is? I should probably move before he shows up.
I knew exactly what chair it was.
Okay, you knew, but you're like, I'm gonna do this because I can.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
See, the thing is that most people don't understand that there's a power struggle on an aircraft carrier between the CAG, who's in charge of all the airplanes, and the ship captain, who's in charge of all the boat, in charge of the boat.
Oh, okay.
Right. So this is all boat stuff, and that's all airplane stuff. And, you know, so I was hoping that the captain would walk in and go, who the hell are you? And who told you could sit in my chair? And I was like, oh, the CAG told me. But that didn't happen. So I just watched my light show and drank my coffee and got out. So, yeah.
That's an experience, man.
That would have been funny.
Cool.
Yeah. But you see, that's the kind of thing that happens when you look for stuff that's a little bit different to do, you know?
Yeah.
Most people would have not had the guts. And I was like, well, they're not going to shoot me and throw me overboard. So that's the worst that could happen. That's probably not going to happen. So, you know, whatever.
Man, and I mean, what a story.
But that was just
one
highlight of my career, is a fun, cool thing that happened. That's all. And then anyway,
that's
cool. That's that unit that was, you know, deployable all the time. And then after that, I got selected to at the time I did 7 years of night school, you know, working in the military during the day and then going to college classes at night. So typically I would go from 7:30 to 4:30 during the day working, you know, a normal job. And then I would have night school at first at the University, Florida State University when I was in Panama, and then at the University of Maryland when I was in Fort Meade, Maryland. And so typically I would have like one class, like the history of whatever would be like on Mondays and Wednesdays from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And then let's say, I don't know, labor unions and business management would be on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I would go do my regular job, and then I would go from 6 to 9, taking college classes at night. And the military paid for 75% of tuition. I had to pay 25% plus books. And that was 7 years. And also a lot of the training for the language training at Monterey and all of that all counted towards like a community college kind of level associate's degree. But I did have to take most of the classes to get the bachelor's degree. So I finished off the bachelor's degree like right there in like 93, 94 timeframe. And then there was this program that opened up at in the Washington, D.C. area.
Before you move on to that, quick question about the logistics of this. So how did you do when you're in Panama how did you do class at Florida State in the early 90s when you were in Panama? Because this is before.
The state had a campus, and they had classes on base at Howard Air Force Base in Panama.
Okay. Yep. Okay. This makes sense. That I was trying to think, I'm like, are you like thinking, people sometimes commute for college. I'm like, are you like catching like a flight or something?
No,
like,
anyway,
okay. Copy it. Got it.
At school. So it's very common if you're in the military and you're deployed someplace weird that, over there across the base, there's, classes. And a lot of times they'll do it like in let's say like at Fort Meade, they had the high school campus. During the day it was a high school, and at night they would have the classes there from the University of Maryland. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that was that. And then when I finished off my bachelor's degree, there was this school. It was called the Joint Military Intelligence College, or JMIC. It was at the Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA, and that was at Bolling Air Force Base. And there was a program called the Postgraduate Intelligence Program, or PGIP, and it was designed. So in the military, if you're a major, which is an 04, or a lieutenant colonel, which is an 05, and you're trying to make colonel, if you don't have a master's degree, at least I'm sure it's the same way it is now, but they have things like the War College. They have, they have things for people to get, especially military officers, to get their master's degree while they're in the military so they can get promoted to that higher level. So if you don't have a master's degree, you're not going to get promoted to colonel. That's just a fact of life in the military.
Okay.
Well, so this class or this school is designed primarily for military intelligence officers, but they had 6 slots, exactly 6 out of there was like 150 officers in the class, but they had 6 slots for enlisted guys, and it was competitive. So you had to apply for it and be selected. So I applied and I got selected, and I went to that school from 94 to 95.
Okay.
So I graduated in 95. So I graduated second in my class, by the way.
Nice.
There was an Air Force female major who her and I were neck and neck. And to this day, I think that the very last test that we both took on the same day was kind of like an essay format, so it could be subjective. And I don't know, I can't prove it, I'm assuming, but I think they might have tweaked the scores just a little bit, because I think she beat me by like a couple of hundredths of a point or something, just because they did not want to give the highest GPA award to an enlisted guy in a room full of 150 officers, which I understand. I get that, but anyway, whatever. I went there and learned a bunch of stuff. That class was strategic intelligence. So the idea there is, okay, forget about tactical, zoom out, look at the bigger picture, consider greater things, think bigger thoughts, and don't be completely focused on what's happening today, tomorrow, this minute, that minute.
Yeah.
Think more strategically and longer term and bigger picture. And that was really kind of an awakening for me to understanding strategic as opposed to that minute by minute tactical, run, shoot, move, communicate kind of thing. So it's a completely different mindset. So, and again,
what was it that, yeah, go ahead. You think you're going to go there. So
yeah, I was going to say that was another situation where I thought that was intriguing. I just thought it was very, very interesting. So I just consumed, again, everything that I could get my hands on along those lines. And there was one teacher, there was a professor, Mark Weisenblum, and everybody hated that guy because he was the one who would use the Socratic method. He would make people think. He would, instead of just giving you the information, he would say, so what about this? What about that? And what does that mean? And you're like going, But I loved it. I thought it was amazing. And he was an incredible instructor. He's passed away since then, but I took every one of his classes that I can get my hands on because I learned a lot from that guy. And there was other brilliant instructors there as well.
Sure.
They're all PhDs, and they all knew what they were doing. And it was like a finishing school for Intel. So it was very good.
That sounds, keep going. Yeah.
Well, then as a result of that, I got assigned to, there was a unit called the Special Operations Command South.
Okay.
That at the time was in Panama. And it was specifically designed to, well, instead of just chucking me back into a regular old plain vanilla Intel collection unit, they wanted to, maybe put me somewhere where they might be able to leverage some of that training they had just paid for. So they put me into the intelligence section of SOC South. So they have these things that are called SOCs. There's Special Operations Command, and then they're regional. So you've got one for Asia and one for the Central Command, and you got one for South America, which was SOC South. So yeah, I landed there, and I was there for the next 5 years until I retired. So, and that was now I'm doing Intel Latin America Special Operations. So that was just really another broad,
All right.
So
So where we just left it off. So all right, so you finish your program at through DIA, and then you end up, you're working in Panama. You're going to,
yeah. So
talk us through where we were. Yeah,
working in special operations was a real eye opener because it's primarily, they call it, you have, if it's an Army unit, it's green. If it's an Air Force unit, it's blue. That kind of thing. When it's a special operations unit that has everybody assigned, they call it a purple unit. So we had Army, it was primarily Army. I want to say 85% of the people assigned there were like Green Berets and stuff like that. And Rangers and paratroopers and stuff. And there was a smattering of Air Force guys and Navy guys, and there was like a one or two token Marines, but it was primarily, it was a purple unit, they call it. But it was really, really interesting to be involved with that community of these guys that were like SEALs. They've been through the filtering process, and all of these schools, for like Airborne, Ranger, Special Operations, they call it an SF tag for the Green Berets, or for the Air Force Combat Controllers and the Navy SEALs. All of these things, all they really are is, we're going to stress you physically as hard as we can, and we're going to drive you to the breaking point, and we're going to see if you're going to quit or you're going to keep going. And if you're tired and hurt and injured and it's raining and it sucks and it's how bad can it be, can you still function and call in that fire mission and do that job and save your troops that are under your responsibility and get the mission done and all of that, even when it all goes to crap, and even when the unexpected things happen. So the people that you're working with have already been filtered 5, 6, 7 times. They've made it through all of these challenges, and then they show up at a headquarters element, which is kind of supposed to be kind of a reward for them. It's like, now we're going to put the polish on you so that maybe you can get promoted and, continue on in your career. And it was just really, really, really interesting. The missions were incredible. So you never know what's going to come up. And it was everything from doing training for different nations, because we would train with the units from all of the countries all over Latin America. We'd have these big exercises, but then we'd also do real world things, so operations would come up depending on the situation of the day. There was one, for example, there was a guerrilla organization called the Tupac Amaru that took over the ambassador's residence in Lima, Peru. They were having a Christmas party. The Japanese ambassador, the Fujimori, was the president at the time. He was a Peruvian, but with a Japanese background. And the Japanese embassy was having a Christmas party right before Christmas. Tupac Amaru, it was called. And it was like 12 guys with machine guns. It took over an embassy.
Oh my gosh.
Took like 300 people hostage. And there were Americans there, Canadians, Australians, Europeans, every country. Basically, the entire diplomatic corps that was stationed in Peru at the time was all of a sudden, from one day to the next, they're hostages. So we were like, doink. And again, we were deployable, instantly deployable. I had to have a complete duffel bag loaded with gear in my trunk at all times. We didn't have cell phones. We had beepers. So if the beeper goes off, sometimes the beeper would go off and there would be a code on there that would say, just report directly to the airplane. So this happened. I was shopping with my family at the commissary. We're shopping for groceries. The beeper goes off and I'm like, gotta go. And we left our cart in the store.
Literally, it's that fast. So the beeper hits, you're in the commissary, you're shopping. You're like, it
I have
drops,
to go
go.
right now.
That's wow.
They want a 10-minute response time. From the time the beeper goes off to the time that your wheel's up, they wanted 10 minutes.
So is that 24/7? Like you have to have the 10-minute response time. So you can never effectively leave the base if you're in this job.
Because you got your stuff in the car, So again, from the commissary, and that I remember the beeper went off. I was like, oh shit, oh there you go. So
and by the way, this I love that it's a beeper. This paints such an accurate picture. Like so you're in the 90s, the beeper's on your hip or wherever you carry it. It's like, look, take it.
We had a little cheat sheet, which was like the recall roster, and it was like it's like if the code comes up like 1111, if it's 4 1s or whatever, it's like report to the unit. If it's 222, do this. If it's 333, and if it's 444, it's go to the airplane because you're going right now. It's like okay. So
and you have your bag with you at all times.
We had to have it in your car, a complete deployment bag. So I'm wearing civilian clothes, right? And I don't know what's going on. But whatever it is, it's an emergency and we're going right now. And we were what was considered to be the quick reaction force for the commander-in-chief, the SINC of the U.S. Southern Command, and that we were the only unit that he could just snap his fingers and we're on the way. And then he would figure it out from there. In other words, we get on the ground and we're going to bring communications, logistics, intelligence, a combat element, and the ability to do some initial things based on whatever the hell's going on. And then he's going to follow in with heavy stuff later. But, we're the ones that we were just as like, okay, send them. So that happens. And anyway, so you drive straight to the airfield and, give my wife the keys and bye. Don't know where I'm going. Don't know when I'll be back. See you. Good luck. You're probably going to want to go back to the commissary and get all that crap that's in the cart. And yeah. But anyway, so Tupac Amaru, they took over this embassy. And this is when it gets into before when we were talking about tier 1, tier 2. Mm-hmm. So when it's a national level emergency like that, when you've got like U.S. ambassador has been kidnapped by guerrillas in South America, all of a sudden that wakes up the entire tree. And the JSOC, which is the tier 1 unit. So you have the national level units, which is everybody knows about Delta Force and SEAL Team 6 and all of that, and the Delta 160th SOAR, the helicopter unit. So everybody knows about those units because they get famous because of what they do. But those are tier 1 forces. So then the tier 1 forces, the unit I was at, which is SOC South, is considered to be a tier 2 unit. So we would immediately fall under them. So they arrive on scene and all of a sudden we work for them.
Okay.
I'm not working for the colonel who's in charge of the SOC South J2 anymore. I now work for the 1-star general who is the JSOC J2. So now that's the guy that I report to and do whatever the heck he needs. So that's just the way the structure works. But that was just one example of one of the things. We had lots of different things that popped up. A lot of times it was people being taken hostage by idiots in South America. And then we would go liberate them and, shoot them in the face and bring the good guys home, stuff like that.
In those types of situations, do you deal with also with like hostage negotiators? We
didn't do a lot of negotiating.
Not that?
No, it was just identify, find them, figure out a plan, go in,
get them out,
get the good guys. Yeah, we didn't do a lot of time. This wasn't like, downtown Chicago when somebody's got, somebody pointing a gun at their head going, everybody back or the rabbit gets it. It's like, no, it's not like
that. It's not like that.
No. It's like, those are bad people and we're going to do bad things to the bad people and do good things for the good people. That's really what it comes down to.
That's incredible.
But lots of those kinds of things, and also training scenarios and, all the other stuff,
Sure. You mentioned JSOC, and something you explained to me in a previous conversation was about what you were in South Command, but that's
Southern Command.
Southern Command. Sorry. And Southern Command and JSOC are both commands, but different, but connected. So how are the different commands organized?
So they're organized geographically. So you've got like SOC CENT, which is Central Command, which is basically the Middle East, right?
Okay.
You've got SOC EUR, which is Europe. So that there you have these regional second tier units, but then JSOC is the big kahuna, and they're worldwide. So they basically whatever for the big issues, things like the Maduro operation would not be done by a SOC South level unit. That was clearly done by Tier 1.
Okay. So that's a great. So thanks for that. So there's the Tier 2 that's the regional command, and then Joint Command is the.
But I've been. So there's a thing called the JOC, which is a Joint Operations Center. So that is the fusion center for all of the operational information, the communications, the logistics, the personnel, the intelligence, everything is flowing through the JOC. And when that whole Maduro thing was going down, I was like, man, I would give anything to be in that JOC right now, just because I know that that's the focal point of where all the information is, the operational, the tactical information for all of the aircraft, all of the ships, all of the drones nowadays, all of the units on the ground. And, because I saw them going in, that video at night, and you see 2 gunships, 2 Chinooks, 5 Apaches. And I'm like, gunships, assault group, and then the 5 Apaches were the perimeter. So what you do is you put the gunships first, and if there's anything on the target that's going to shoot at you, you shoot at them first, you eliminate them. The Chinooks are going to fast rope in all the guys that are going to take over that compound and go get Maduro. And then the 5 Apaches are going to fast rope in a star pattern around, and they're going to be facing out to make sure that nobody comes in to screw up the plan. And then you go in, snatch his gravis, get the guy, put him on the aircraft. Everybody's out. Okay, everybody pulls out. Bye-bye. We're done. That's it. But as soon as I saw that nighttime, those aircraft flying on the horizon like that, I'm like, gunships, Chinooks, security. Just as soon as I saw the video. Yeah.
Do you keep a pretty close eye on that news? Just given your background, and that was your job for a while, right? Effectively, you were keeping an eye on the news when you're in your Panama guy days. But
if I had still been in the military at that time, then I would have been in that JOC, because it's a Venezuela op. So therefore, it's Southcom responsibility. Of course, it's a national level unit, so it was all being done national command and control. It was probably being coordinated either in Florida or in Puerto Rico or something like that. But that's where all of the puppet masters are that are controlling all of who's doing what, where, when, why to who.
Would you any other thoughts on that on the Venezuela thing, or before we thoughts in general?
If you think about it, it's been a festering pus wound since the 90s when Hugo Chavez got elected for the first time. When I was at the SOC, actually, Venezuela knew that Hugo Chavez was coming. So they actually invited us. The government of Venezuela, before Chavez, was reaching out to the U.S. government and going, hey, man, you got to help us. This is going to be bad, because they knew what was coming. I don't think the U.S. and the Southern Command and everybody had a really clear idea of what was going to happen. He was elected like 7 times or something like that, but he was bringing this socialist agenda and the Bolivarian Revolution, and it just turned out to be a mess. Maduro was his direct selection to be his successor, after he died. Hugo Chavez died of cancer. But when Chavez is gone and Maduro takes over, he's been there ever since. Now, they're laundering money for Russia. They're, sucking up to Iran and China and doing all of these things, trafficking drugs. It was a drug trafficking organization. They were just pumping tons and tons of cocaine into the U.S. There's a long story there. I've written a book about that I'm about to publish as well, having to do with the history of cocaine trafficking and the development of the drug operations in South America. But anyway, to make a long story short, Hugo Chavez was a drug trafficker.
You kind of just dropped this bomb, just like casually, like, oh, I wrote a book on this too. No big deal. So can you just, the quick version about, you said that you're about to publish it. Is this something that people can?
No, I still got to do more chapters on it. Because the thing is that the whole thing blows up because if you do it right, and again, I don't want to do it half-assed, so I'm trying to do it right, but you can do the history of the development of the drug war. And I had an inside view on a lot of exactly how all of that went down. Like starting with, you can start with Pablo Escobar, for example, and taking him out. Well, then the FARC wakes up one day in Colombia and they're in charge of all the, this $2 billion a year drug industry. They're like, okay. So then they start making all this money. Well, they basically took over the country. Colombia goes, we're going to lose the entire country. So they went to the U.S. The U.S. comes up with Plan Colombia. We start, building these counter drug battalions, and that was effective. So then the FARC had to get out of Colombia. So they just went across the border into Venezuela. By now, it's late 90s, and Hugo Chavez is in charge. And they said, you know what, we can still make all of these drugs. And he was like, perfect. So he had this guy named Danny Noriega. So he just becomes a state sponsor of, government organized drug trafficking. So now they're flying the cocaine directly produced by the FARC in Venezuela.
What's the FARC? Sorry.
The Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias Colombianas. So it's the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia.
Okay, thanks.
Forces Armed Revolutionary Colombia. So
got it. Thank you.
In Spanish. So anyway, that happens. Then now they're trafficking all this cocaine, but when it gets to Nicaragua, they would just hand it across the border to the Mexicans, and that's where all these Mexican drug cartels popped up in the late 90s, and they were really bloody. They were a mess. And and then you fast forward that, then you bring in fentanyl,
okay,
and then you bring in the illegal immigration. So the problem is that as I start researching this, I started off by looking at Maduro, cocaine trafficking, and let me just give that history. But then all of a sudden, you've got to spread out into the economics. You got to spread into the oil. You got to spread into the money laundering. You got to spread into fentanyl. You got to strategically speaking, as a strategic analyst, let me explain what's going on.
Please.
Trump wants to stop the war in Ukraine. Both of the knuckleheads that are in charge of that are trying to make money off of the gig. Okay. There's more money is pumped into Ukraine for the Ukrainians that they're swimming in money and they don't know what to do. Putin hasn't, basically got his hand caught in this trap, and he can't extract himself in any coherent form. So both of them kind of want to keep fighting. The only way that you can motivate Putin to stop is by turning off the economics. And the way you turn off the economics is by the oil, and look what happens. So do you remember seeing on the news that the president has authorized CIA operations in Venezuela? Did you see that headline?
I did not, but I believe it.
Okay. So there was a headline months before this actually went down that Trump has authorized the CIA to operate in. I'm like, that's the stupidest headline I've ever seen. Because of course they were operating in Venezuela. They've been operating in Venezuela for 50 years. I mean, don't be dumb.
Okay.
But that was all a psyop. Okay. That was just a psychological operation.
Really?
Yeah. It's just to
cool.
make them. That's why there was Cubans guarding Maduro. Because there was a $25 million bounty on his head. All you need is 10 dudes with guns and go, you know what? Screw it. I'll take the 25 million. Let's grab it and, throw him on an airplane. So he had Cubans guarding him. And those were the guys that died. So anyway, that worked. So it's all to shut down the money. The money in Venezuela comes from gold, gold mining, but not normal gold mining. Gold mining, that's an environmental disaster, oil, and drug trafficking. So if you shut down the drug trafficking, if you shut down, and this is where you're seeing the boats blowing up. As soon as I saw that first boat blow up, I'm like, oh boy, that's different. We never did that shit when I was doing it, because I did a lot of counter drug. But, I was like, they blew up a boat. Whoa, okay, gloves are coming off, man. It's a different day. So anyway.
So why would they blow the boat up, do you think? Was that an oil boat or?
No, it was drugs.
It's drugs, okay.
Yeah, it's full cocaine. They blew up a bunch of them. I don't know how many, but they were just like, hey, drug boat. Whoa, okay. Wow. We never did that. I did counter drug for 30 years. I was like, okay, good.
Wow.
Let's go. Okay. So you shut down the drug money. You shut down the oil money. Now that oil tanker, the Bella 1 that they caught in the North Atlantic, they found a hidden compartment on that boat that had been welded shut and painted over, and it was trafficking. It had like 1.5 tons of gold from Venezuela. They had like parts for drones and shit. So this is the shadow fleet that they always talk about, for moving money around to avoid these sanctions. Well, Trump just goes, you know what? We're going to enforce the sanctions. They just took another, I think either today or yesterday, they just took the 6th oil vessel. There's only like 16 of them in this shadow fleet that have been moving oil around the world, and they'll change the registration and they'll change the transponders and they'll hang over the side and they'll paint a different name on the side of the boat. They do all this stupid shit because they're trying to launder money for Russia. And if Russia doesn't have the money from the oil, He cannot continue to do this war in Ukraine. He's going to run out of money. He's already run out of manpower. Take a look at the demographics of Russia. It's astounding. You always start by looking at the demographics of a country, and you'll see that they cannot sustain anything. Russia is not a threat to anybody. They're not a threat to their own grandmother. They couldn't do anything to anybody at this point. The only thing they got is nukes. So, you're going to start World War III, fine. You'll vaporize. It'll be done, But in a regular tactical ground assault warfare with tanks and shit, they can't stand up to Europe. They can't stand up to us, and they can't do a damn thing. They don't have the manpower. That's why they had North Koreans going into Ukraine to try to continue that combat, because they just ran out of red meat. They killed them all. There's like 1 million people dead. So Trump is like, you know what? This shit's got to stop. So he's trying to negotiate. Neither one of them want to negotiate because of the money. He was like, okay, cut off the money. Done.
Interesting.
That'll be done within 2 months. Ukraine.
The Russia-Ukraine conflict? Really?
It'll be done within
the
2
war,
months.
I mean? Wow.
It'll be done within 2 months. And then what happened? We do Venezuela. Maduro's back on the U.S., in the U.S. shores. And then what happens? Iran goes off. You think that was by accident? That was a CIA operation. This is what the CIA does.
The Iran thing was, or the
Iran, yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. The timing was classic. So you've got operators on the ground, and their job is to work with the people who are not happy with the Ayatollah, whatever, the Ayatollah of the Wheat Club, the wackadoodle Islamic jihadist murderers that have been exporting hate and terrorism around the Middle East and around the world for the last 47 years. The vast majority of the people in Iran who don't think like those guys, they want it to be over. So CIA has been there forever organizing these people. And of course they went, okay, Venezuela goes first, and then Iran goes. So Venezuela, we got that. Okay, that's all good to go. And Act 2. And then there it goes. Turn right on like a light bulb. And like, yep, there you go. So then you take off the Iran part. So you take those 2 major chess pieces off the board. The other one that's going to go down is Cuba. Cuba's done too, because they don't have any gas. They got all their gas came from Venezuela, and that stopped. So when all those gas tanks run out, when all that fuel is gone, they don't keep the lights on in that country anymore. They don't have solar, they don't have wind, they don't have fuel. If you can't run generators, the electricity stops working, and then people get angry. So you're in one fell swoop. You're going to take off the board Venezuela, Iran, and Cuba.
Wow.
And Trump looks at the whole thing and goes, there's a lot of really good real estate there. You remember when he was talking about the Gaza Strip? He's like, I'm going to build it, man. We're going to do hotels and casinos. I'm like, that sounds like Trump. He looks at everything like a real estate development.
Wow. That's fascinating.
It's really nice property. Look at Cuba. Cuba in the 50s, man. It was all hotels and casinos. Nice beaches,
I don't know. I've never been, but I believe you.
Look at the before Fidel Castro, before the whole Soviet Union revolution, before JFK, before Bay of Pigs and the missile crisis and all of that shit, before back in the 50s, it was a vacation destination. Everybody would go. It's 90 miles from Florida. It was a short hop, It was a
Makes
playground.
sense, yeah.
Yep.
Man, that's cool. I appreciate you going down that little rabbit hole with me. That's fascinating.
But that's what happened when I started to write the book, because I started like Maduro, bad guy, cocaine smuggling. I'm like,
sure. Well, so now you got to go.
It just went, just went off. Off the hook there. I'm like,
well, I get it. Yeah, you got to follow. You got to follow what's interesting.
If I'm going to do it, I got to do it right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. So, let's come back then, if we can, to what we were talking about a minute ago around the we were talking about your work in South America, and then we're talking you finished your education, and then so how did that, before you pivoted for a minute on your other book, how did you end up then? You finished your 20 years, I'm guessing. You finished your 20 years, and then how did you end up turning that into your work in the private sector?
Well, after I retired, I got hired by a U.S. military contractor to do intelligence collection services for 3-letter agencies throughout South America.
Okay.
And that's all I can say about that.
Yeah, fair enough. So
because it's different when you're military and when you're civilian, you sign non-disclosure statements, and that's what I can say.
Okay. So were you living in South America then at this time? Can you say that? Can you talk about? Okay. So you're in South America, and then so how do we Well, I don't know what question to ask because I don't want to put you in a place that you can answer. So I'll let you tell the rest of the story. How about that?
I did that for 5 years.
Okay.
And then in 2005, that contract ran out.
Okay.
It terminated. And I was in Panama, and I decided that I wanted to stay in Panama. So I said, okay, I'm unemployed. I don't have a job. I'm no longer in the military. But I think there's an opportunity here to do, to be like a news source. I wanted to be an investigative journalist because there was a large expat community there of Americans, but also Canadians and Brits and Australians. And for example, people from Germany that speak English, but not Spanish. So they didn't really have a good source of news. There were some people there kind of doing it halfway, but they weren't doing a good job of it. Sure. So I was like, okay, so I want to do that. It's like, what the heck? I can be a journalist. So I just woke up one day.
By the way, I just like this attitude of like, why not? I can be a journalist. I can do that. Sure. I just like that. Why not?
Because journalism is a very, very close first cousin to intelligence reporting. So
got it.
It's the same thing as go, what's going on, go get the information, do the analysis on it, put it together in a format that people can read it and understand it, and then they make their own decisions. And I made a conscious effort to keep all bias out of it. So what I would do is there was all of these, in Panama, there's primarily 3 political parties. And each one of these parties has their own newspaper, radio station, and television station. So if you're getting it from this channel, they're going to be in favor of this party and against the other 2 parties. And the same thing is for all 3 of them. So there was these news reports that would come out, and I would take the original source of news, either from a newspaper or from a television report or what have you, and then I would translate it from the original Spanish into English. I would credit the source, so it came from this newspaper or whatever, and then I would put a line and say, okay, editor's comment. So that's what the newspaper said. That's the story. But then what I would write would be editor's comment, and then colon, and then I would write. So that now if you're reading it, if you're digesting this information, that this is what the news report said, and now this is Don talking, right? So in other words, and I would start things off with, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's like clearly my opinion. I'm not trying to hide it. I think it's dumb. If you think it's dumb and you agree with me, perfect. If you think it's not dumb and you think that's the smartest thing ever, then off you go. Have a great life. I don't care. I would and for the most part, about 85% of the people agree with me and the other 15% didn't. But even the ones that didn't agree would still go to the website and read all the traffic.
Yeah.
So
because they'd appreciate the unbiased aspect of it, to be able to have the translation and the understanding.
That was my way of handling bias. Every time I was writing on a story, I knew that I had my own opinion, the way I felt about it. But I also wanted to make sure that, because I assumed, I made a couple of assumptions there, that the people that are reading the stuff that I'm writing are very smart and that they have their own opinions and they're smart enough to make draw their own conclusions. And it's not my job to push that one way or the other. But at the same time, I can tell them what I'm thinking. Right? As long as they know it's mine, it's commentary. So whatever. That's just how I decided to handle it.
And it was clearly effective. I mean,
oh yeah, no, it was, And then the comment section was wide open as well. So anybody could just comment, I agree, I disagree. What about this? You forgot about that. Okay, well, whatever, and I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was just trying to, make a living. And then I was a one-man operation. I ran the website. I did all of I learned how to code HTML. I did all of the website building. I did all of the sales. I did all of the advertising work. I did all of the news collecting, all the reporting. I was a one-man show.
It's a lot, man.
And I just decided I got to the point where I could all right, if I want to make this grow, and I had the thought for about 8 seconds. I said, you know what I could do? I could open up one of these in every country in Latin America. I was like, nope, nope, don't want that headache, bro. Do not want that at all. I wanted to keep it. I decided, I made a mental decision that it will grow and it will get as big as it can get that with just me doing it. I did not want to run around chasing a bucket full of monkeys. I did not want that. So didn't want to go there.
I like it. So
then that turned into reporting on serial killers. There were several serial killer cases. I got my 15 minutes of fame. I did Dateline, Nightline. I did 48 Hours twice. I was on the Canadian Broadcasting CBC. I was on BBC in the UK. I did Discovery Channel. There was all of these different shows about the serial killer cases. So there was one that was Wild Bill. His name was William Dathan Holbert, and his wife was Laura Michelle Reese. And I know that they murdered 13 people that I can prove. I have information on. I got him to confess to 6. I tried when he got arrested and he was in prison, he got all religious and, he was basically using religion to take over the prison. I was like, oh, I'm talking to him on the cell phone. I was like, so Bill, I see that you've gotten very religious now that you're in prison. He's like, yeah. It's like, okay. I said, why don't you tell me about this woman here that you murdered on this day in this situation? Where'd you bury her body? I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you do. It's like, you don't care. You've confessed to the 6 that I was able to clearly identify, but I'm aware of these others, and he never has confessed to those. And I know what happened too, because I went back to the place where he buried the bodies. That land has since been bulldozed to build housing developments there. So the burial sites have been turned over. So that'll probably never be solved.
Wow.
I know he killed a German woman for her white SUV, stole the car, buried her in his backyard, basically, the property behind the house he was renting in the western coast of Costa Rica, Jaco, and then sold the car. That's the kind of stuff this knucklehead would do. In that case, she was never identified. She's still on the books, whoever she was. I know she was European. I know she had an accent. Somebody said she was German, but no name, no identity. Don't know who she was. She's just a missing person in South America.
How did you go from running this website to then solving murders?
People would call me up and say, hey, there's this situation. Our friend is missing. We went to the Panamanian authorities and they're not doing anything about it. Can you get involved and please help us? That's how it happened every time. I call myself a one-trick pony because it was the same scenario that started it every time.
But why you? Like, why you? Why?
Because
how did the first person? Oh, because you had the website.
So it's and everybody knew that I was an investigative journalist and I would do this.
Okay, so it's basically okay. Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
So
okay.
They in the case of Wild Bill, what people don't understand is that after the invasion of Panama, so before the invasion of Panama, the military forces basically ran the entire country. After the country was invaded, what they did is they stripped they eliminated the military. Panama does not have a military; they have a police force. And then they put strict controls over the police force. The police force can't do anything unless a civilian prosecutor gets involved and tells him what to do and gives him the authorization to do it. So if you're in a remote backwater like Bocas del Toro in Panama, and there's a missing person, and somebody says, hey, our friend is missing. This is unusual for her to be missing. And then they do a little preliminary investigation, and somebody says, well, last I heard, she was at the bar and she hooked up with some guy and she took off with him on a sailboat. They're gone. It's like, oh, so the local authorities at the lowest possible level, they go, well, we looked around. Do you see her? I don't see her. Okay. Yeah, case closed. And that was it.
Yeah.
But the other people, the other Americans on the ground, they knew that somehow this one individual was involved. So I said, okay, give me everything you know. And I got all the information. I did my own investigation and was able to conclude beyond a shadow of a doubt that this guy, Wild Bill, again, William Dathan Holbert, and his wife had murdered this woman. Her name was Cher Hughes, and in order to take over her property and companies and business and stuff like that. And then I went to the Panamanian authorities. Now, the other difference is the FBI that has representatives at the embassy in Panama, they are limited. They can only go to their parallel authorities. So there's they can't go above the DIJ. So the DIJ is the Panama's version of the FBI. They can't go straight to the ambassador, right? I didn't work for anybody. I could do whatever the hell I want. So, and again, the other thing too is all of the Panamanian political people in Panama, they all made the assumption that I was CIA, right?
Interesting.
Right.
And you're not, and I was going to say,
I was not CIA. I was not.
But yeah, but also you're like, think what you want, right?
Well, that's it. But so they all convinced themselves that I was CIA, so that when I called, they would answer. And when I asked questions, they would tell me. It's like, what about this? What about that? Most of the time it was about political stuff. It's like this guy and, these three different political guys are jockeying for one another. Well, I would all call them, and this guy would tell me dirt on that dude, and this guy would tell me dirt on that dude, but whatever. I was just, trying to find out what the heck was going on.
Sure.
But anyway, when I got this story on this William Dathan Holbert Wild Bill guy, I just went straight to the Attorney General's office, walked straight in the door and said, hey, boom, here's what I've got. This guy killed this woman with his wife, and that's how it went down. Here's the information I got. And they went,
that's incredible.
He went, interesting. This is like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He goes, can you come back at 4:30? I went, yeah. He goes, okay, come back at 4:30. I was like, all right. So I came back at 4:30 and they bring me into this office. And so there's the Attorney General. And he says, before you start, he says, okay, bring him in. He opens the door and in walks the entire Panamanian press pack. So, I mean, representatives from all 3 television stations, television crews with cameras, from radio and newspapers. I mean, there's 30 journalists are in the room all of a sudden. So what I thought was going to be a private meeting with the Attorney General turns into a press conference. I went, so then he goes, okay, tell them. I was like, here's the pictures. Here's this guy we're looking for. I said, it's all on my website because I had published when I walked out the door to go to this meeting. And I told myself, it's like, I'm not going to, blow this investigation by publishing early, but I had all the information and I hit go. And then I went to this meeting so that when this press conference comes, I said, all of the information is available on my website. Feel free to take all the pictures, do whatever you want. I don't care. But what we need to do is spread the word to find this guy, at least find him. Where is he? So that he can be questioned, because right now he's in the wind. And then that turned into a long manhunt. He was eventually arrested at the border between Costa Rica and Nicaragua as he and his wife were trying to escape through Costa Rica and to get into Nicaragua to get the hell out of Dodge because it was getting too hot. And it was getting too hot because of all the reporting and everything that I did. It was something like a scene right out of a Hollywood movie. When he was actually arrested, he was caught by the Costa Ricans at a border point right there on the river between Nicaragua and Costa Rica. And they let him escape. He was able to get in the boat and drive his boat up the river. The Nicaraguans were listening on the Costa Rican radio communications. They knew that the guy escaped. So now they got a gunboat with a 50 caliber machine gun mounted on the bow. And they're on a loudspeaker going in Spanish, either pull over or we'll shoot. And he ignores them and he keeps driving up the river. And then they opened up on him with the 50 caliber, putting rounds right next to the boat that he was in. So that's when they went, okay, if we don't stop, they're going to kill us. So they gave themselves up. So the Nicaraguans arrested him, brought him back to Managua. The Costa Ricans across were like, would you please give us our serial killer back? And they're like, no, man, you lost him. We got him. So they milked that for like a week to get, take the credit for catching the guy. And then he was extradited back to Panama, and he's still in prison in Panama. So him and his wife.
Wow. That's wild. And so then you do something once. And so then it turns into,
it's the same thing. Somebody's missing. Somebody's missing. The Panamanians are not doing anything. Can you help? There was one case there was the Javier Martin case. So this was he was actually a Spaniard, and he was murdering people on sailboats in the Caribbean side of Panama. And I heard about that case. The first time that I knew anything about it was on a Thursday. And then the victim's nephew flew down the next day on a Friday. And then we did a couple of things over the weekend, had a press conference Monday morning, and he was arrested Monday afternoon. So I heard about the case on Thursday, and he was arrested Monday afternoon. So 4 days from notification to dude in handcuffs. And he's still in prison as well. And he's guilty as shit. So he did it. He murdered a bunch of people, including Don North and a guy named Javier Bouchard, who's a Frenchman who was on a catamaran, and he was also trafficking drugs. So bad dude.
And there's still like stuff out here. I just, like people can go, like there's articles about like I just did a quick search.
If you do a search for
Don Winter, Javier,
Don Winter, Panama serial killer, you'll find all that shit.
I just did
CBS, because I've been on CBS, 48 Hours, Dateline, Nightline. You'll find all those shows.
And even fairly recently, so I searched Don Winter, Javier Martin just now, and yeah, I mean, there's an article in 2021. It seems like it was 5 minutes ago. That's wild. When we're done here, I'll follow up and get a list. Let's see if I'll put together a list of them, and then I can link to some of.
The last one was Brian Brimminger, who murdered Ivan Baldelli in Panama as well. murdered her, chopped her body up, threw it in the jungle.
Oh my gosh.
Went back to San Diego, sold off all her stuff, by the way, in Panama, and then went back to San Diego, used her laptop from his apartment in San Diego, trying to spoof her relatives, going, no, I'm fine. I'm in Costa Rica or whatever. But the emails actually came from his apartment in Costa Rica using her laptop. And in that particular case that I gave the FBI a key piece of information, which was the actual machete that he used to dismember her body, that he had cleaned it, but it still had her blood under the handle. So I provided information to the FBI that was sold on a local swap board in Panama. And I was like, he sold that machete to that guy. So that guy's got that machete. So they went and got the machete, took the handle off, found Yvonne's Baldelli's DNA under the handle. And when Brimminger was presented with that information in San Diego, that's when he confessed. And he decided that, okay, they got me. If I got you on the forensics, then you're done. And that's when he rolled over and confessed and copped the deal. And they let him cop a deal because it was an international case. It was being tried in the U.S. It was going to be logistically difficult to try the case. And he got like 20 plus years or so. So, yeah.
That's how did you find out that thing about that machete?
You remember the thing about rabbit holing, getting focused on something? Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I can go on some of these cases. I went for weeks and forgetting to eat. Okay. I mean, I would just get focused on it, and find things like a local chat room on a local website in Panama. I'm not talking, Facebook or YouTube or anything like that.
I mean, this is back in what year is this? 90s?
Yeah.
So we're talking like bulletin board systems and random things like that, like really obscure chat rooms.
Early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah. It was like a little website, little local swap.
Oh my gosh.
I got shit to sell in Panama,
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Like before Craigslist, stuff like that.
And interestingly, in that one particular thing, he had listed this machete that he wanted to sell. And somebody that was interested in buying it, the person who actually ended up buying it, asked him, what kind of shape is it in? Is it relatively new or is it all beat up? And he answered back, I've only used it to chop up one stripper. Ha, ha, ha.
Oh my gosh.
There you go. Go ahead. Let's present that in court,
That's
and he actually
wild.
did use it to chop up Yvonne Baldelli. And I don't know if Yvonne Baldelli was a exotic dancer. I don't believe so, but that's what he said anyway.
Wow. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. But that's the kind of stuff that I found myself involved in. And yeah. And there was several of them. Javier Martin, Wild Bill. There was another one that was actually before Wild Bill. It was a Panamanian guy that murdered an American woman, then went down to work on the that one never made national news. The guy that was the murderer was kind of politically connected, and the Panamanians were trying to get me out of it and brush it under the rug and kind of take care of him. Yeah. But they were trying to keep that under the radar.
Keep it under wraps. Wow.
Yeah. That one never. Yeah. But that kind of stuff.
That's incredible. Yeah.
But the thing, it's the same thing. It's get the information, do the analysis, collect the information, collect the intelligence, do the analysis, figure it out, connect all the dots, write the report, and present it to, in this case, the public instead of a military commander, and then help the authorities.
Okay. So that's amazing. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So how does that turn into your work in near-death experiences?
Right. So real simple start to that. My father is 92 years old, and he had an event. He had an event where I had a doctor's appointment, and it was like a place that was like a 40-minute drive away. And it was like in the winter time, and, there wasn't a lot going on. I said, hey, you bored? You want to go with me? I got to drive down to Suffer, and, I got to go do this medical appointment. He's like, sure, I'll go. So we drive down there. I do my medical appointment, and I'm done. And I'm like scheduling the next appointment or whatever. And I could just tell that Dad was off. I could just tell that something was going on. It just wasn't right. And when I was done, I was like, all right, let's go. And he stood up and he starts walking towards the door, but I can tell that he was off. Something was wrong. And we get outside of the doctor's office, and there's a stone column there. There's like this overhang, and he like leans up against this stone column. And I got around in front of him. I'm like, Dad, are you okay? Are you all right? And he's like staring like through me. His eyes are focused beyond me. I'm like, yeah, he's out of it, and that's when he went down. and he was wearing a heavy winter coat. So I was able to just grab him by his coat and then gently lay him down on the ground, so that he didn't go down hard.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, oh shit. So luckily, we're right in the middle of right in front of a doctor's office that included a cardiologist office. So I ran inside and I screamed, used my, it's called a command voice, your military command voice. In other words, I can raise octaves and I can project. All right. So I ran inside and I said, help. I said, call 911. I believe my father is having a stroke. Do it now. I think that's exactly what I said, but very, very loudly. And,
Sure.
and of course, every head in the place, all there's like 4 receptionists and nurses and all that stuff and patients. But I was just like in and out. And that didn't take, 10 seconds to make that announcement. And then I ran back outside to be with my father. And then within seconds, there was probably 20 or 30 nurses and 5 doctors out there, just hovering over him. This is emotional for me. It turns out, to make a long story short, he had a stomach bug that he didn't mention to me, and he had diarrhea and he had vomiting and he was dehydrated, and it was the dehydration is why he passed out. He spent a couple days in the hospital, and then eventually he went back home. And it was like a couple of weeks after that event that we were just talking about it. And he says, the last thing that went through my brain at that moment as I was passing out was, I wonder if this is what it feels like to die. I went, okay. Well, my 92-year-old father is thinking about what it's like to die. Well, is anybody shocked about that? So that's what prompted me to go into the idea of investigating near-death experiences.
Wow. So then thank you for the early version on that, or the early background on it. So then, but you didn't stop there. It seems like this is one of those things that then became, you were able to, really lock in on, and it became a little bit of a passion for you. So what was your next step after that? So your dad kind of poses the question directly, like, I wonder if this is what it's like when we die. Yeah. And then where do you take it from there?
So my dad has always been, he had people in his life when he was a young man. I'm like 10, 12 years old. He had aunts and uncles who were very, very religious.
Okay.
But they were also very critical of my father and his father, my grandfather, because they were not as religious as they were. And they were also very hypocritical, where they would say one thing and do something else. Basically using the whole religious angle to try to manipulate other people to get things that were better for them or whatever. So my dad got that sour taste in his mouth from an early age, and he's never been a go to church guy and, none of that stuff. But he also is an amazing role model for morals and ethics and values and just doing the right thing. So he's always lived an impeccable life. He would qualify for sainthood if he was in the right club, but he's not. So, and that's just, and he always would say, well, his favorite line is, I hope that when the time comes that I'll be pleasantly surprised, to find out that there is a God and there is a heaven and there is. So I was like, okay. So that's when I just kind of decided there's a big question that I can figure out. I can work on that one, and again, rabbit hole, get focused, do nothing but that for a long, long time, and figure it out. And
so you see, your dad was not religious, heavily religious, but I feel like it's really hard I think it's hard for a lot of people to separate those two things, God and afterlife and religion. Like they're heavily connected, obviously. What's your, just for context, would you consider yourself like a religious person?
No.
Okay. So where did you start? Did you approach solving this problem like any of your other problems that you were solving, and then, but the second thought kicked in is, something interesting here is that you're also very aware of religion in general, it seems like. So when I read in your book, and knowing what I know about you now, about your fact-based approach, this all lines up. I mean, I could see that what I read about in your book is like, oh yeah, this seems like it lines up pretty closely. It doesn't seem like there's, at least it seemed like there was a strong attempt to keep conscious bias out of the parts of your book that I read. So,
here's the really cool part that I like about that angle.
Yeah.
that first of all, it is not my job to tell anybody how to think about anything.
Yeah.
And here's the trump card.
I like that. Yeah.
Okay. The trump card is, it does not matter at all what you believe,
You're right.
what
Yeah.
religion you're in. It doesn't matter if you're an Orthodox atheist who says, nope, you die, you go on the ground, the worms eat you, that's it, you're done, have a nice day. There's no religion, there's no God. And
it doesn't matter. You're right. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You could
be, because what's going to happen is going to happen. Yeah.
You can be Hindu. You can be Buddhist. You can be Christian, Catholic, Jewish. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what culture you're from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. You can be an Eskimo or you can be on an island in the Caribbean somewhere. It makes no difference. The data shows, and this is not me just spouting crap, thousands and thousands and maybe millions of near-death experience stories all point to the same thing. The same thing happens to everybody. Full stop.
Wow.
Now, I went through this process of looking at the data as data with no bias and only trying to just simply figure it out. Okay. There is a revolution going on right now because you've got access to the internet. You've got YouTube. Here we are. You've got podcasts. You've got databases. You've got websites. And there's more and more people talking about it. So right now today, you have people who had a near-death experience maybe 30 years ago, but they were like, I don't want to talk about it because everybody's going to think that when I had my heart attack, it got my brain too, and now I'm loopy, so they would just not talk about it because they were concerned about.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But now everybody's talking about it. So that whole bias is going away. That's a really good point. That combined together with modern medicine. Now, again, you're talking to somebody who's had 4 heart attacks, count them, open heart surgery, carotid on my neck. I've had all kinds of health issues, and there's the modern health availability right now, which has never happened before in human history. Now, 300,000 years of human history. 300,000 years. It's easy to say. Those words just fall off your lips. You have to understand that writing was only developed 5,000 years ago. You have 295,000 years of oral history where nobody could write anything down because it was impossible, because writing did not exist. Okay? Now, what's the first thing you get? Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is the first thing, on clay tablets.
What do you mean Gilgamesh is the first? Oh, Gilgamesh is the first writing? I didn't know that.
The story of history of writing, the first thing that was ever written down ever on the planet was Gilgamesh.
Really?
Yeah.
This is learning for me. Thank you. Okay, cool.
Go read the Epic of Gilgamesh. And what you've got is this amazing story of all of this crap that's going on, but nobody had ever written anything down before. Where did all that storytelling come from? We had an oral, and again, 300,000 years of oral tradition history.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, if you have some guy, and this is in the book, by the way, it's called The Hunt. If you happen, and I created this fictional scenario of a hunter-gatherer party in the African Rift Valley region, 100,000 years ago. So they go out, they have a hunt, they kill an animal, they're going to bring it back. And there's guys standing on top of this saddleback over a ridge where they're going to go over where they kill the animal. They're bringing it back down to where their camp is. And whack-a-daryl, he gets hit by lightning. Dead. He's dead. He's flatline dead. Right. And these are people that kill things for a living. Okay. They know what dead looks like. So they're like, oh crap, that guy's dead. He got hit by lightning. So they're like, okay, they take the meat, that he was carrying, and they're hustling everybody else off the mountaintop because they don't want anybody else to get hit by lightning. And then they're getting ready to pack him up to bring him back down to camp. And like 5 minutes later, he wakes up. And what's the story that he tells? He tells the same exact near-death experience story that happens to everybody else.
Wow.
Right? And when he tells that story in that clan, forevermore, that becomes the most interesting story that has ever been told around the campfire for that group.
Sure.
And they're going to repeat it. Even after all the people that are dead that were there, it gets told over and over and over again. And what are the basic elements of a near-death experience? I died. Mm-hmm. I left my body. I went into the void. There was a tunnel. There's a light. I went to the light. this guy knew everything. He's God, right? Where did I go to? I went to heaven because it was a really nice place, right? I ran into my ancestors. Your grandmother's in heaven, okay? I ran into my uncle that died a long time ago, but he's up there. I met that guy, right? These are all the classic elements of the existence of an afterlife. The continuation of conscious after death. You run into this bright white source of energy, which people call God now, but that's just the word that we assign to it. But it's still the same. It's still the exact same experience.
And it's always a white source of energy. They always describe it as a white.
Yep. It's always described as a light that was impossibly bright, but it didn't hurt my eyes. Now you got to remember, a soul doesn't have retinas. A soul doesn't have eyeballs. Okay. You can't burn out the eyeballs of a soul that doesn't have eyes. See what I'm saying? It's just a bright light that you can see, but it's a light that communicates with you telepathically.
Fascinating.
So this is the classic experience, right? Die, cross over, encounter the light, have your life review. Sometimes you have the idea of, well, your body is still viable, so it's time for you to go back. Well, this is the plan that you made when you were planning. Oh, reincarnation. Yeah, reincarnation is real. And then you come back into your body and then zap, there you are. And then you're like, well, that was a trip. You know, maybe you tell people, maybe you don't.
So a couple of questions I have about this. So one is there consistently a point at which an experience becomes like a near death experience? Like as people who shared it, is there something consistent where it becomes like, is it like the heart stopping that makes it a near death experience consistently for people, or is it?
Yeah, I had to draw my own data set. So I decided.
All right, so this is, if we were looking at this from a perspective of you were writing the Panama guide, this would be Don's commentary. Now this is less than the data. Is that right?
No. This is just what I'm saying is this is how I approach the data.
Okay, copy. Okay, got it.
So there are a lot of people. Have you ever heard of my life flashed before my eyes? You know?
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I would call a fear death, like being afraid.
Yeah. Okay. Fear death experience. Interesting. Okay.
Like you know that feeling when you're going right over the top of a roller coaster, right?
Yeah, for sure. And you're like, goodness, what did I just do?
Imagine you're driving down the road, and you're in the car, but the guy that's driving is drunk, and then there's going to be this terrible accident, and you see it coming, and you're like, crap, we're all going to die. But then there's an accident and the airbag goes off and it's not as bad as you thought it was going to be. Well, at that moment in time, your soul reaches down in the seat and it grabs the ejection handle and it says, yep, well, we're about dead now. So I'm going to have to bail out of here. And the physical body is going to get smoked in this accident and I'm going to punch the hell out. That happens a lot. Okay. Now, there's not an accident. There's not a complete excuse me, flatline death involved there. But the same thing happens with the soul. So there's a lot of times where there's out of body experiences, a lot of them that are associated normally with some kind of a medical situation, but you don't have a flatline death. But I just decided for my own data set, I want dead people. I want, the classic, shock them back to life or, got ejected through. There's all the other thing that I determined too is that there are any thousands of different ways to die. I mean, you got crushed by a car, got ejected through a lot of the overdoses, drug overdoses. There's an accident and, you get literally blown through the windshield of your car and you're laying dead face up in the road on a highway and the rain coming down and you're out of your body 30 feet up in the air. When you look at enough of these things, and I've looked at, watched video, investigated thousands of them, to the point where it gets boring. Okay. They get repetitive. It's the same thing over and over and over again. And I'm going to go, all right, so at this point in time, this is going to happen. And there it is. So it's the kind of thing of that both things can be true. So the experience is very, very individualized. It's particular to that person because it was them, it was their operation and they had the problem and the details. It was their doctor and their hospital and all. So it's very, very detailed and specific to that one individual. However, when you take a step back and you just look at step, they repeat and they're predictable and very often come in the same kind of pattern. There are subsets and there's all kinds of different things. Some people have more of a focus on their life review. Some people, they have a very, very brief near-death experience where they're like, let's say they're on an operating table and something goes wrong and they're like, boop, they're dead. Oh, gee. Well, boom, they have an out-of-body experience that might last 40 seconds. The doctor says, okay, hit him with this, hit him with, adrenaline, hit him with that drug, and then zap or whatever, and whoop, you're back in your body. So you had a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience that lasted before you could even look around and figure out what the heck's going on.
But people still remember it, and then they talk about it, and they're like, this happens. Do all the same, in those abbreviated ones, do all the same kind of milestones still happen that you talked about? Like the lie, the greeting by love. Is it interesting? But I
tend to focus on the ones that are kind of catch my attention, that are a little bit different or more in depth or sometimes even funny. So have you ever heard of the idea of a spirit guide? No?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Right. Well, so when you die, right? Let's say it's whatever the scenario is, that you die and then boom, you're out of your body, your soul leaves your body. And then a spirit guide is somebody who is there to basically act as a guide to help you through the transition process as you're reorienting from being in a human body in a three-dimensional timeline Earth. Well, now you're not doing that anymore. So now your soul is free from your human body, and now you're going to do this transition thing. So the spirit guide is basically there to go, it's okay, it'll be fine, everything's okay, you're going to be all right, and to help you along. And now we're going to do this. The funny one, it happens very often that people who have a deep religious upbringing, let's say it's Christianity and it's God and Jesus and the pearly gates and all of that. So this is one of my favorite ones. This guy dies, and he pops out of his body. He's looking around, he's going, oh crap. He's like, that's me, and I must be dead, And then he looks, and there's this dude standing next to him, and he goes, you must be Jesus. And the guy looks at him, and it's funny because the spirit guide had a sense of humor. And he goes, nope, I'm not Jesus. And he goes, well then, in that case, you must be God. And the guy kind of laughs again and goes, nope, not God either. He goes, well, who the hell are you? And he goes, I'm Drake. That was just the dude's name. Not Drake, the famous Drake, but just
not Drake, the rapper. Yeah,
I'm
Drake. Just guy named Drake. That's funny.
I'm Drake. I'm the spirit. I'm just here to help you transition. Come on, we're going to go this way. It's like, keep your hands and feet inside the car. It'll be fine. But it was just kind of there was a comedic element to it there. And the guy's like, okay, because he was expecting.
That's funny.
Expectations to see religious features, and that's very common. It's very. You still have your brain is still adjusting from one side to the other, so that's very common.
When people have these experiences, I'm thinking about Drake in this example, what's your perspective? I'm interested in two things. One, what's your perspective on it? The idea, this thought according to Dawn, and then also, what does the data tell you about this? Do you think that these experiences that people have, is it something that's happening like more like an afterlife? Or is it just, I heard it described by one guy as just kind of the same way that nature knows how to build your body and grow and do what it's supposed to do. It's like your body is already kind of hard coded to know what it needs to do to shut down.
Okay.
So and which is it? Is it?
There's a chapter in the book which is called The Science of Denial. So I took a hard look at that. I went all the way down that rabbit hole. And when the medical field and doctors and scientists look at the idea of near-death experience, that what they focus on completely is the physical body. Okay. So it's like looking at a broken radio and saying that radio signals never existed. Okay. So just because the body stops working and they try to explain it as, well, there's not enough oxygen flowing to the brain, or there's too much carbon dioxide, or it's just hormones, or it's just chemicals, or it's survival instinct, or all of the things that you're talking about, that, your body ejecting all of these drugs into the system to try to make you survive. Well, then there's a point in time where the events unfold during a near-death experience where that the science cannot explain it, particularly the out-of-body experience. So let's say, here's the hospital room, and let's say I'm injured or sick or dying or whatever, and I'm in this hospital room, and I'm alone in the room. My family member is 200 feet down the hallway talking to a doctor that I've never met before. Let's say that the doctor's name is Dr. Jones, okay? But that doctor is in charge of my care. But I don't know that Dr. Jones existed. I've never met him before. I have no idea who he is. Now, my loved one and Dr. Jones are down the hallway, a great distance away. So it would be physically impossible for me to hear anything about this conversation. Unbeknownst to them, I died in the room. And I had this out-of-body experience. Now, I go, okay, what's going on? So I wander out, my soul wanders out into the hallway, goes floating down the hallway, and I can observe, and I can see, and I can hear this conversation between my loved one. It's like, oh, there's my loved one. And they're talking to, who's this guy? Well, hi, my name is Dr. Jones. Okay. And this is how we think it's going to go. Well, they don't know I just died. I just coded in the room. But, and these kinds of cases where people see and hear things they happen so frequently that it's ridiculously common. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
There was one case where, the person was saying that, well, when I observed you, that I could see from the back of your head that you've got a big ass bald spot right in the back of your head. And of course, they'd never met this guy, Dr. Jones. How the hell do I know your name is Dr. Jones? And by the way, you got this big ass bald spot in the back of the head and you got a stain on your neck right there. And they're like, well, how the hell would they know that? I'm telling you, I saw you from behind. You can't explain it. There's no explanation for it. It's impossible to explain. But those kinds of things happen with a ridiculous frequency. So when I approach this, you were talking about my own personal opinion and bias.
Yeah.
So I started off with this, again, because I knew that, I was kind of aware of near-death experiences, but I really didn't know anything about them. So I started to investigate it. And then when something gets my interest, it's like, this is kind of interesting. So then I got more and more involved in it. And then the more research that I did into it, then I was like, this is intriguing. It's beyond interesting. It's like really compelling. And I finally eventually went all the way through that progression to just absolute acceptance. This is just what happens.
Yeah.
Based on my analysis, based on the data, if you don't think that's what happens, if you think that I'm wrong, God bless. Because again, it don't matter at all what I think, what you think, whatever happens to you when you die is going to happen. We all have an expiration date tattooed on the back of our neck that we can't see. You don't know when that date is. That's why the title of the book is You're Going to Die Someday, right? Well, you are. And when it happens, you're going to find out.
Wow. So what, something that I read in your book as I thumbed through it was around there was a line that stood out to me that said something around, you're describing the milestones and then you're like, and then the data stops.
Yes.
I grabbed the line. And right. So how far do we get before the data stops for us right now?
The point there is that there is a boundary that you can get to. So that when the only people that we get to interview are the people who die and then come back, and that their body is still viable. All right.
Okay.
Let's say, for example, you're a worker in a fireworks factory and you're standing next to the vat of ANFO when it goes off and your body is instantly vaporized. We're never going to interview you. Okay. Your body is not viable. You're not coming back, bro. It's over. Have a nice day. The only people that we ever get to interview is people who are injured or sick or whatever, that were temporarily separated from their physical body. They had this experience, but then they came back and then they talked about it. So those are the only people that we talk to. There is a particular subset of people that they're like, when they cross over and the information is presented, well, you should go back or you can go back. And they're like, no, man, I love it here. This is great. I don't want to go back. Well, if you go to a certain extent in that process, there is a hard boundary. And people are told, if you go any further into this process, it will be impossible for you to come back. You cannot return. If you take one more step, it's the boundary. There is a boundary. There's a hardcore boundary. And anybody who has gone past that boundary has never been interviewed.
Sure.
You follow it?
That makes sense. Yes, of course, because yes,
it's impossible.
But there are people who've said that you've talked to that remember like this is the point of no return, and take a step.
They were told clearly. They were told clearly that if you go any further any deeper into this process, there's no coming back.
Wow.
But then we were like, well, you've got your kids, you've got this reason to live, you've got these things that are going to happen in your life later that were part of your life plan that you designed before you were even born. So you've got things that you should go back and do. And it's always a convincing process. It's not like you will return. There is no commandment there. It's always of free will. You make the decision to return. Yep.
That's really fascinating. So I have 1,000 questions in my mind that I want to ask. What was the most surprising thing to you as looking back on this research? Was it, it's come to a bit of a...
There were a couple of elements. So the idea of hell, for example, everybody knows what hell is, right? You'll be happy to know that hell does not exist.
Okay.
That it's completely man-made, and it's designed to create fear and anxiety, so that if you don't do what we say, then your soul God will condemn you to hell for the rest of eternity, and you will burn in hell and suffer for. Okay, here's one for you. A soul doesn't have any nerve endings. So you're going to do what now? Your soul can go walking through the middle of the sun and be perfectly fine.
Interesting. Okay.
How are you going to torture me, bro? Nothing hurts. Bah.
Funny.
It doesn't exist. Hell does not exist. Okay. When you look at the near-death experiences and you look at the life reviews, there are people who have had relatively difficult lives. They've had a lot of trauma and bad situations that they've had to survive. And when they're talking about their near-death experience, they say, I was in hell. It was like I was in hell. I was going through hell. They use the word hell, and they say that it was very traumatic because they had a bad life and all kinds of bad things happened to them, and they had to confront those things as part of their life review. But it was always done in a compassionate way. So it's like you're going to school. It's like you're going to college, and you're learning. Your soul is learning and growing as you come back in these multiple reincarnations.
So tell me, you've used the word, that's the second time you used the word reincarnation. So tell me what you mean by a reincarnation here.
Okay. So the way this works is, and again, this is not me talking, this is the data talking.
Yeah.
The way this works is that before you come to a life on Earth, that what's called your true eternal self, which is your part of your soul, which never leaves the other side, that you basically send out a part of that energy to live a life on Earth. Before you come here to live that life, you come up with a life plan. It's like, well, I haven't, maybe I need to work on this, or I need to work on that, or let's see what it's like to be somebody who's, I don't know, handicapped, or, in some kind of a difficult situation, or chronic illness, or, any number, if they're blind, or any number of things, because, well, you got to learn a lot from that kind of a life, right? So they come up with this plan, and then that's your life plan that you're going to do when you come to the Earth here. Now, remember, time doesn't matter on the other side. Time does not exist. It's not a linear timeline like here we are on Earth with 1 second, then the next moment, then the next moment. You can't live the moment from 10 minutes ago. You can't live the one that's going to come up in 10 minutes. The only moment you can live is the one that we're in right now. That's only in this reality. It doesn't exist on the other side. Time is basically multidimensional. So again, living an entire lifetime is basically like snapping your fingers. It doesn't mean anything at all. Time is irrelevant. Go and you live these experiences. An existence on Earth is considered one of the most difficult options. That we go through a lot of crap on this planet. Just ask the Middle Ages and swords. And it can be traumatic to be a human on Earth. But the point is that you go through these experiences, you learn things, you come back, and then you do it again, and you do it again until you learn, until you've basically got nothing left to learn. And then you become a spirit guide for everybody else. And then there's Drake. So that's kind of the plan.
So Drake is the goal. That's here. Drake is the goal.
Have you ever heard of Jainism? Jainism. So Jainism originated in the northeast part of India, and it is the seed cosmology for both Hinduism and Buddhism. So both Hinduism and Buddhism grew out of Jainism. The problem with Jainism is it's a really bad franchise. So imagine if there was this dude named McDonald's that was really good at making cheeseburgers, and he made them on a street corner in any city in the world, but he didn't have any interest at all in making more restaurants. That was Jainism. They didn't care. They weren't evangelical at all. They weren't looking for new followers. They don't really care what you believe. But when you look at of what Jainism thinks and believes, it's basically a photocopy of what you learn by studying NDEs.
Okay.
Now, Hinduism and Buddhism both grew out of that, but they added elements to make it a more interesting franchise. So grow, and now there's a lot of people. All of the religions that survived that are around today are ones that have created and used these concepts and created a better franchise. There's 1.3 billion Catholics in the world, for example. That's a pretty good franchise. Every time you go to every little city you go in anywhere, you're going to find a church spire, and it's going to be St. Joe's or whatever. Yeah, that's a good franchise. They got a good model for when it comes to creating more of them, because that's power control, money manipulation. That's why they do it. All you have to do is just study history and you figure that one out. Now, what's interesting is Catholics, for example, have cut out the entire concept of reincarnation. You only got one shot at the apple there.
Yeah.
They don't want people thinking about the possibility of reincarnating. And there's an entire subset of Catholics who have had near-death experiences who were flabbergasted to find out that reincarnation is real. And it's like, there's one guy I remember that described it as a tapestry, that they presented him with this, basically an entire huge wall where every little block of the wall was a life that he himself had already designed and lived and finished.
Wow.
And you've already lived all those lives, and he can actually zoom in kind of like mentally and go
remember those places.
No, it's relive them. You can
or relive those. Wow.
Yeah, because your life review happens instantly. It's an instant download, and it's telepathic. So it's not like you're watching a movie. It's like your entire life.
Everything at once.
Every single thing, this conversation, you'll be able to relive it instantly in your life review when you get to that point.
Wow.
And the whole thing is downloaded to your brain in entire form. And again, time doesn't matter. So you can take an eternity to review all of those details ad nauseum until you get to the point where there's nothing left to learn.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. That's how it works. Based on the data. This is not me spouting crap. This is what the data says. And these are based on hundreds of thousands.
Are all the reincarnations? So does the data tell you that all the reincarnations are like different human lives, or do you think, or does it seem that they are more like interspecies or things like that?
Are you talking between plants and animals and bugs and stuff like that? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There's elements of that in
really.
Yeah, I forget if it's Buddhism or Hinduism. They try to codify some of that stuff, but here's the one thing that I know for sure. Okay, this is what the near-death experience data shows, that the only thing that we share as human beings, that we share with every living thing on Earth, is that we're all going to die, and it doesn't matter if it's a bug or a plant or an antelope or a worm in the ground. If it's alive, it comes from the exact same life source, the life energy source, which we call God. It all comes from the same source. It's all the same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they die, and when they die, they go back. There are people who have gone, and as part of their NDE, that they've crossed over, they talk to the white energy source, they do their life review, they go to the garden, they meet their ancestors and their relatives. Then they're having complete conversation with like grass and flowers and trees and shit. I mean, just complete telepathic conversations.
Wow.
Yep. It's that's a subset.
This is all in the book, right? It's things like this.
Yep,
okay.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to this. I have one last question if I can, maybe hopefully not last, but I have another question. So obviously there's a boundary, and you said that, people can't cross the boundary. I'm going to just work with me for a second, because I have this question in my mind, and I'm going to try to formulate it as best I can on the fly. So there's a boundary. People can't come back past the boundary. does anything, I guess here's my question. Did anything change in the process or do you have any data on people who maybe narrated up to crossing the boundary, such as like, say there's someone who's sick and is dying. And I've read these stories or heard stories about people who are dying and maybe in a state of semi-consciousness at the time and narrating some of these things that are happening as they go. And then ultimately do die. Mm-hmm. Do those stories differ at all for the ones who actually?
So that's a subset of people that are basically in palliative care that are maybe chronically ill or ill from, let's say, cancer or something. Sure. So that when that happens, that you have people that are like that they're approaching death. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's even instances where people will kind of cross over a little bit and then come back. You're basically waiting for the body to give up the ghost, so to speak.
Yeah.
But then when they cross over and they come back and there's like, hey, I was just talking to, Uncle Louie who died 20 years ago. It's like, really? Yes, I was. It's like, okay. So that, because they're able to kind of have like these, I call them like mini NDEs, you know, because their body is shutting down. And again, the way I see this is like the soul with their hands on the ejection handle, just ready to go. It's like, we know the body's given up, because we're riding around in these meat sacks. This is just what we're using, here it is. Sooner or later, it's not going to work anymore. It has an expiration date, just like a gallon of milk. You're not going to drink 100-year-old gallon of milk. You could try. It's not going to be good,
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about drinking a 100-year-old gallon of milk and just how quick and disgusting that would be. That's gonna thinking of ejection, that's gonna be right. Yeah, you're gonna go quick. Okay. Now this has been amazing. Is there anything else you want to cover before we kind of wrap it up here? If there's one thing, go ahead.
The biggest thing for me in the book is the historical, like anthropological approach of the idea that these ancient near-death experience stories were the seed for all of the concepts. Now, if you look around the planet, then why is it that practically every language, every culture around the world, no matter where they are, have some kind of a belief in an afterlife, a God figure, a soul?
Yeah.
The relatives, in the happy hunting ground or whatever, it doesn't matter. Everybody believes the same thing. Where did that come from? And there's an entire chapter in the book. It's called The Silence of the Denisovans. So there were about, what was the number? I forget what the number was. I want to say it was like 400, like billions of Denisovans that existed. They never developed the ability or the desire to have what I call a ritualistic burial. So we're going to bury somebody in the ground and we're going to put some ornaments or something with them to take to the other side. So if you'd ever developed the idea of an afterlife, then they would just let their people, when they die, they would just leave them where they were. You know that we human beings have never, ever, ever in the history of humanity discovered a Denisovan burial. Not one. No skeleton. We've got a bone fragment. We got a little bit of teeth, maybe, but with billions of people that lived those lives over 400,000 years or 500, I got the numbers in the book. I don't have them off the top of my head. There were a bunch of them and not a single burial site ever. Then along come the Neanderthals, because the Denisovans, Neanderthals, and humans were all on the planet at the same time. The Neanderthals went for like 200,000 years. Listen to that number, 200,000 years plus with no burials. Okay. The first time they had a ritualistic burial, there's a site in what is now Israel. There's 2 caves, and these 2 caves are like 50 meters apart. So you've got modern Homo sapiens living in one cave, and you've got this hybrid Neanderthal group living in another cave, and they're very, very close. You can almost toss a rock from one to the other. I believe that concept of an afterlife and all of that was pollinated kind of into the Neanderthal culture community somehow or another. And then now we've got a couple of burials. I think it was 120,000 years ago was the first Neanderthal ritualistic burial.
Okay.
But that was after 200,000 years, 300,000 years plus of zero. And then all of a sudden we start finding grave sites. So that's what I'm saying is how do you reconcile that stuff? You know, how do you go from
that there's
we don't bury people at all. We don't bury people at all. Well, then all of a sudden we're going to start burying people. Well, that's belief in an afterlife, right? Here's one. This was interesting.
And so go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
Here's another one that came along that was stunning to me.
Okay.
I investigated the idea of, well, what do people put in the grave sites when they bury them?
Yeah.
Here's a really good question. When was the first time that we ever found a ritualistic burial with a weapon?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah. Okay.
What's the answer? The answer is with the advent of agriculture. Prior to agriculture, we were hunter-gatherers. We would wander around. We would kill animals for meat. We would, and if the group of guys next to us are a bunch of buttheads, we just move on. We're not going to sit and fight over them. You see how many antelope there are out there? There's a lot of burgers out there on the plains, man. Yeah. We can go to another river that they're getting goofy about it or whatever. We're not going to fight. Why am I going to risk my life, to get into some kind of a physical conflict? I can just move. I can just move. We're nomadic. I don't got to fight over anything. There is no organized conflict, no evidence at all of any organized conflict between humans until agriculture. Because as soon as you stop and then you build houses and you plant crops and food and all of that, now you got something that somebody wants to take from you. And when that happens, that's only about 11,000 years ago. Only about 11,000 years ago. Before writing again, all right, now 6,000 years before writing existed, but now you start finding grave sites that have swords in them or weapons.
Fascinating.
You would find things in burial sites like from early Homo sapiens, but you'd find it's called a stone axe, which is where it's like about as big as a softball, but it's sharp on one side and you would use it to chop, to dismember animals. But it wasn't a weapon. It was just something for processing animals for meat. Right? So
help me bring those things together.
Okay.
Here's what I mean. This idea of, so what I heard you describe a couple of different things that are super interesting. I think this idea that the first identification of a grave site being, how does that, what is it that connects that to the belief in an afterlife? Just help me make that connection if you don't mind. How does the
you ever seen a squirrel bury a squirrel?
No, I can't say that I've ever looked for one, but
any animal bury another animal?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never thought about it, but probably not. I guess my assumption was
they do not. In the animal world, if an animal dies, right?
They don't bury it. Yeah.
Now, I actually have Rocky the raccoon in the book. All right.
Okay.
Imagine Rocky the raccoon is walking down the road one night and he gets hit by a Buick. Blam! He gets blasted by a Buick. Rocky Raccoon is dead. He has a complete afterlife experience. He has a raccoon version of a near-death experience. He leaves his body. His little raccoon soul goes off, and he's looking down at the body. He's going, oh, man, I'm dead. And he runs into a raccoon spirit guide, right? But then guess what? His body is still viable, and for whatever reason, he goes back into his body. He shakes it off, and he goes, man, that was the craziest crap that ever happened in my life. What is something that a raccoon cannot do? He cannot speak. He cannot relay that information to anybody else. The story dies with him. He walks away thinking, that's the craziest crap that's ever happened to me in my life. I guess I'll go check out that garbage can. Right? That's why there's no raccoon pope. Okay? That's why there's no raccoon churches. Right? If you cannot describe what happened linguistically, and again, now I'm looking at this as a linguist. If you can't tell that story, the story dies with you. I personally believe that the Denisovans lacked a particular bone that's required for complicated speech. Now you can go, you can do hand signals and you can do gestures, but complicated abstract thought of a concept of an afterlife, that's pretty sophisticated. And from just a simple linguistic point of view, look at it. Look at what happens to every single person that has a near-death experience. There's a chapter in the book. It's called Words Can't Explain. There is no words for me to explain what happened. I can't describe the amount of love or joy or compassion or, the colors were so vibrant. It's not a human experience. There's no language for that. Words can't.
So it's not that it didn't happen before these guys. It was happening. We weren't able to have record of it.
They couldn't
describe
tell
it.
the story themselves.
Sense. Yeah.
That's why I call it the silence of the Denisovans. I believe that they had near-death experiences. They were just basically a prototypical human version of Rocky the Raccoon. They couldn't tell the story.
That's cool, man.
If you can't tell the story, it never happened.
That's so cool. I appreciate you breaking it down for me. This has really been fascinating. I learned so much, and I'm really looking forward to diving into this book a little bit more. If it's okay, can I put, when we're done here, I'll put, if you're okay with it, a link to your book and your website, and where's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So the best way would be through email at it's Don, D-O-N, at, and then everything is tagged with the same handle, which is Winner, W-I-N-N-E-R, which is my last name. It's Winner NDE. And so it would be Don at Winner NDE at Gmail.
Okay, got it.
WinnerNDE.com. It's Winner NDE on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram.